Chapter 1847. What's your name? A middle-aged woman from Vulture Palace asked. I'm Fan Yao, the right emissary of light. Fan Yao smiled slightly, and the ferocious mask on her face seemed to add some color. The two carefree immortals. There was a lot of discussion in the hall. The left and right emissaries of the Ming Dynasty were not only highly skilled in martial arts, but also handsome and elegant. They were famous figures in Jianghu. Looking at the island masters and cave masters' shocked expressions, Song Qing Shu couldn't help but sigh inwardly. With a different mindset, the way of looking at things would be different. To them, people like Yang Xiao and Fan Yao were already top-notch figures in the Jianghu, but in the eyes of true experts, they were nothing. Because of the appearance of a new force, Murong Fu and Zhuo Bufan finally stopped and looked at the two unkindly. When did the Ming Dynasty reach so far? Wei Yixiao said with a fake smile. You can come all the way to Tianshan, but we, the Ming Dynasty, are in the western region, so we can't come? Zhuo Bufan said to Murong Fu, Brother Murong, let's get rid of our common enemy first, and then we'll settle the score later. Murong Fu nodded and said, Okay. After successive defeats, there was almost no place for him in this big world. Vulture Palace was his hope to turn things around, and he didn't want to be taken advantage of by the Ming Dynasty. I'll deal with this stinky bat. Zhuo Bufan stretched out his long sword. An array of green light shot toward Wei Yixiao, startling him. If he hadn't decided to dodge in an instant, he might have died on the spot. Wei Yixiao was very angry and directly used his peerless lightness skill to attack Zhuo Bufan. Unfortunately, there was a foot of sword light on Zhuo Bufan's sword, so he couldn't get close at all. He was so angry that he shouted, I've long heard of the two carefree immortals. Murong Fu has come to learn from you. Murong Fu was a little afraid of Wei Yixiao's cold ice palm, so he let Zhuo Bufan attack with sword light, which could greatly weaken the power of the cold ice palm. As for Fan Yao, whose martial arts were higher than Wei Yixiao's, he was not afraid at all. I'd like to see how you plan to counter my attack with a dose of your own medicine. Fan Yao laughed as she charged forward. The two of them quickly exchanged over a dozen blows. Song Qing Shu secretly nodded. In the original work, Fan Yao's martial arts were already very high, almost equal to one of the Xianming elders. In this world, Fan Yao's martial arts seemed to have a new breakthrough. Now, it seemed that he could easily defeat any one of the Xianming elders. Even if the two of them joined hands, he would still be able to protect himself. It seemed that revered Ming had given him many pointers on his martial arts after he returned to the Brightness Summit. Otherwise, he wouldn't have improved so quickly. However, Murong Fu's martial arts had also improved by leaps and bounds. It would be extremely difficult for him to defeat Murong Fu. Song Qing Shu searched for Zhang Wuji again, but he still couldn't find any trace of him. He couldn't help but be surprised. Logically speaking, he shouldn't have missed such a good opportunity. Where did he go? Although Fan Yao and Wei Yixiao's martial arts aren't weak, I'm afraid they won't be able to intimidate all the heroes here. At this time, Fan Yao was thinking the same thing. Sect leader said that he would come back as soon as possible after going to the Central Plains. Why hasn't he arrived yet? Could it be that he was delayed by something else? The only thing we can do now is to stall for time and wait for sect leader to arrive. It's really lively here. A loud voice came from the door. A tall monk led a group of foreign monks in. It's actually him? Song Qing Shu also recognized the person. It was his old acquaintance, the Vajra faction master. He was a little puzzled at first, but on second thought, the Vajra faction was originally located in the west regions, so it was normal for them to appear here. He didn't expect that the Mongolians and the Ming Dynasty also had the same idea. It seemed like they were planning to take over the Condor Palace through this internal strife. But he was a little puzzled. Where did these people come from? After all, the Nine Heavens' 9 divisions were at the Iron Chain Cliff. How could they let these people come up so easily? Unless these people had been hiding here for a long time and were waiting for the right opportunity to come out. Seeing the Vajra faction master, Fan Yao's expression changed slightly. She thought, if sect leader still doesn't come, I'm afraid we'll have to die here today. So, it's the scum of the Ming Dynasty. It's really a case of wearing out iron shoes in fruitless searching, only to find you by chance. The Vajra faction master was overjoyed. It should be known that the Ming Dynasty was the Mongolians' greatest threat in the West regions. This time, he actually ran into two of the Ming Dynasty's higher-ups. The four great kings of the Ming Dynasty had either left or died. Now, only Wei Yixiao was left. Fan Yao was the third most powerful person on the Bright Peak, second only to Zhang Wuji and Yang Shao. If he could capture them all in one fell swoop, the higher-ups of the Ming Dynasty would be greatly weakened. Seeing that the Mongolians had arrived, Murong Fu and Zhuo Bufan naturally wouldn't be stupid enough to fight to the death with the Ming Dynasty. They immediately retreated to the side, their hearts heavy. They originally thought that there were only people from the Condor Palace and the 36 islands and 72 caves. They thought that with their martial arts, they would be able to intimidate the other heroes. They didn't expect that more and more forces would arrive, and the situation would gradually go out of control. Fan Yao and Wei Yixiao stood together. She put on a brave front and said, "It's still uncertain who will be the one to capture who. When our leader arrives, none of you Mongolian lackeys will be able to escape." The Vajra faction master's expression changed slightly. It was obvious that he was somewhat wary of Zhang Wuji. All these years, the Mongolian Ming Dynasty had been fighting in the West regions. As a top-notch expert raised by the Mongolians, how could he not have fought with the other party? If that's the case, then let's end this quickly. The Vajra faction master snorted and quickly made arrangements. Bai Wanjian, you and my people will deal with Wei Yixiao. Leave Fan Yao to me. Bai Wanjian? Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat. It was only then that he noticed that there were a few people from the Snow Mountain sect among the people from the Vajra faction. Back when he was still in Jingzhou, he had witnessed the people from the Snow Mountain sect attempting to assassinate the magistrate of Jiangling. They had wanted to use that person as a qualification to join the Mongolians. He didn't expect to see them again today. Lingxiao City also seemed to be in the west regions. No wonder they had appeared here. While Song Qingshu was in a daze, the group of Mongolians had already surrounded Fan Yao and Wei Yixiao. Fan Yao had been able to hold her own against Murong Fu earlier, but now that she was facing the Vajra faction master, she was in a perilous situation and could only hang on bitterly. In the distance, Murong Fu and Zhuo Bufan's expressions changed drastically. They knew very well that the Vajra faction master's martial arts were far above theirs. They had put in so much effort this time, but it was all for naught. Wei Yixiao tried to help Fan Yao, but unfortunately, the Snow Mountain sect sword formation was very strict. In addition, the Vajra faction's itinerant monks' martial arts were even more profound. He was almost injured by them several times and only managed to hang on by relying on his lightness skill. Song Qingshu noticed that the attire of the itinerant monks was very similar to that of the foreign monks he had seen teasing Xiao and Cheng Qingshuang in the desert. They must be from the Vajra faction. Although those people from the Shaolin Temple don't get along with me, I have to admit that it's just that they have different standpoints. The Shaolin Temple has no lack of eminent monks, but this Vajra faction is known as the Shaolin Temple of the West regions. What kind of people are they raising? Song Qingshu snorted to himself. Chapter 1848. At this moment, the situation of the battle changed. Fan Yao dodged and finally found an opportunity. Her long sword stabbed the Vajra sect master's ribs with an extremely exquisite and strange move. His smile froze as soon as it appeared because he did not feel the tip of the sword piercing through flesh. Instead, it felt as if he had stabbed a piece of fine iron. Oh no, it's the indestructible Vajra body. Fan Yao immediately came to a realization, but it was too late to retreat. The Vajra sect master grinned maliciously as he pressed his palm against the blade of the sword. The long sword instantly broke into several pieces. Without the support of the long sword, Fan Yao's entire body involuntarily fell into his arms. His other broad palm pressed against her head. Mighty Vajra palm. Fan Yao was scared out of her wits. If she was hit, she would not be able to survive even if she had several lives. She hurriedly gathered all of her internal energy and raised her palm to meet the attack. Fan Yao spat out a mouthful of blood and staggered a few steps back. Her right hand was hanging unnaturally by her side. It was obvious that she had been severely injured by the mighty Vajra palm. The Vajra sect master grinned hideously and spread his wings to pounce toward her. Fan Yao. Wei Yixiao noticed the situation and hurriedly used his peerless qigong to reach Fan Yao's side. He grabbed her and flew out. Trying to escape? Not so easy. The Vajra sect master snorted coldly and slammed his palm toward Wei Yixiao's back. Wei Yixiao used his cold ice silk palm to meet his palm and spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he used the recoil to fly out of the hall. The Vajra sect master looked at the layer of ice on his hand and snorted. He circulated his internal energy slightly and recovered to his original state. He then instructed his disciples, "Go after him." Although Wei Yixiao's qigong is peerless, he has just been injured by my palm and is carrying a heavily injured person. He won't be able to get far. Yes, a group of Vajra sect disciples filed out and chased in the direction Wei Yixiao had fled. Song Qingshu's expression was rather interesting. Fan Yao and the others had just arrived with their heads held high, but now they were fleeing in a sorry state. They had originally planned for Zhang Wuji to come as well, but for some reason he did not appear. At Mount Zhonggu, Zhang Wuji kidnapped Xuanmuhua. Jinluan Fuwang, Zhou Batong, and the others chased after him. Could it be that he was injured by them? However, he immediately denied this conjecture. A thousand-year monster like Zhang Wuji was not someone that Jinluan Fuwang and the others could deal with. Later on, the people of the deaf and mute sect found Shui Muhua's corpse. It was obvious that she had been silenced. Everyone else thought that it was Jinluan Fuwang's doing, but only Song Qingshu knew that the murderer was revered Ming. I wonder what kind of information he got from Shui Muhua. Could it be that it's even more important than taking over the Vulture Palace? Song Qingshu frowned in deep thought. Unfortunately, he had no clue at all. The Vajra faction master strode to the center and looked around. From now on, the Vulture Palace will be under the jurisdiction of the Mongolians. Does anyone have any objections? The island masters and cave masters looked at each other in dismay. The Mongolians were powerful now. Who would dare to provoke them? However, they yearned for freedom after all. They had just tried to break free from Tianshan Tonglau's control, and now they were going to be enslaved by the Mongolians again. Murong Fu and Zhua Buffan's expressions were ugly. They could barely deal with the previous situation, but now that the Mongolians had joined in, it was no longer something they could interfere with. They had just witnessed the Vajra faction master severely injure Fan Yao and Wei Yixiao in the blink of an eye. The two of them knew that they were no match for the Vajra faction master. In fact, if it had been someone else, the two of them might have stood a chance even if they worked together. After all, Murong Fu and Shangwan Tanji could barely suppress Xiaofeng. It was a pity that the Vajra faction master had cultivated the indestructible body of Vajra. His entire body was impervious to swords and spears. Even if the two of them worked together, they would not be able to break through his defense. At this moment, the yellow-robed woman from earlier said, "As long as you help us kill these troublemakers, the Vulture Palace will obey the Mongolians' orders in the future." At this point, they understood that Tianshan Tonglao was most likely dead. In that case, they might as well use the Mongolians' blades to avenge their sisters who had been sacrificed. The Vajra faction master chuckled. "That won't do. Although these people's martial arts aren't that great, there's nothing they don't know. They're perfect for the Mongolians. But how can we let go of this blood feud?" The yellow-robed woman said angrily. The Vajra faction master was expressionless. "That's not up to you. I have the final say here." The people from the Vulture Palace were furious, but there was nothing they could do. Since when did the Vulture Palace, which has always been our rival, become so useless? At this moment, a sinister voice sounded from outside the hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a tall and fat man striding in. The tall man was dressed in green and black clothes. He was extremely thin, but he exuded a cold and murderous aura. No one dared to look down on him. The fat man was dressed in a golden robe with copper coins embroidered on it. He was smiling like the Mithriya Buddha in the temple. The messengers of rewarding good and punishing evil. There were many knowledgeable people in the hall who immediately recognized the two men. The island lord and the cave lord were arrogant and unruly just now, but when they saw the two men, they all kept quiet out of fear. The noisy hall instantly quieted down. The messengers of rewarding good and punishing evil of the Island of Heroes were too famous, especially for the middle and lower level sects in the Jianghu. They were like nightmares. If they were not careful, they would be annihilated. The sect master who was invited to the Island of Heroes was nowhere to be found. Speaking of which, the Island of Heroes and the Vulture Palace had always been in a competitive relationship. Both sides relied on taking in the smaller sects to increase their strength. A few years ago, with the deterrence of the Heavenly Mountain Tong Lao and the Life-Death Talismans, they were evenly matched. However, now that Heavenly Mountain Tong Lao was gone and the Vulture Palace was in internal strife, they were naturally no match for the Island of Heroes. Song Qing-shu, on the other hand, was very depressed. Originally, he had only planned to come in and take a look at the situation, and then he would be done with it. Who knew that these people would act like they were performing on the stage? Do you think this is a public toilet? You can come and go as you please. If you want to leave, you can leave. Song Qing-shu's mind suddenly came up with this line. From the Island of Heroes? The Vajra faction master looked at the two men and said lightly, "Your island has always minded our own business. Do you want to make an exception today?" Zhang Sen chuckled and said, "You are mistaken, sovereign. Our Isle of Heroes has sent people to the 36 islands and 72 grottos several times, but the Vulture Palace has always tried to stop them. Now that old Lady Tong has passed away, no one will stop them from visiting the Isle of Heroes." When they heard that they were going to the Island of Heroes as guests, they all looked terrified. After all, because of the lack of information, the martial artists of the Central Plains were terrified when they talked about the Island of Heroes. They did not know that this was actually a great opportunity. Not only would they not die if they went to the Island of Heroes, but they would also have the opportunity to learn superior martial arts. Of course, they would also have to listen to the master of the Island of Heroes. Chapter 1849. Zhang San chuckled. The Vajra faction is located in the West region, while the Island of Heroes is in the South China Sea. We're thousands of miles apart. Even if we invited you, where would you go? Is that so? The Vajra faction master smiled insincerely. Didn't you come all the way to the West region? Zhang Sen answered, "We brothers travel all over the world, rewarding those who are kind and punishing those who are evil. We happened to be near the West region recently and heard about the commotion at the Vulture Palace, so we came over to take a look." The Vajra faction master scoffed. "I can't be bothered to talk to you. I'll ask you one last time. Do you dare to meddle in Mongolia's affairs?" The Snow Mountain sect members beside him had complicated expressions on their faces. Before they joined the Mongolians, they were worried that the Island of Heroes would invite them. However, now that they had the Mongolians as their backing, they were no longer afraid of facing the terrifying messengers of kindness and punishing evil. Li Si replied with a cold expression, "No matter how strong the Mongolians are, they can't control the Island of Heroes in the South China Sea." The Vajra faction master laughed. "You said so much. In the end, we'll have to fight. What's the point of talking so much?" Zhang San smiled. "I've long heard that the Vajra faction master has an indestructible body that's impervious to weapons and fire. We didn't really believe it, so we wanted to see for ourselves." The Vajra faction master scoffed. "Although the messengers of kindness and punishing evil strike fear in the hearts of others, you're nothing but ants to me." Zhang San laughed. "I didn't expect the Vajra indestructible divine technique to be so good at talking. I'm impressed. You're courting death." The Vajra faction master was furious. He swung his fan-like palm at them. Zhang San and Li Si spoke casually, but they dared not underestimate the Vajra faction master. They quickly moved to the left and right to block his palm. whether it was Fan Yao's or Wei Yixiao's cold ice silk palm. They collapsed upon contact with the Vajra faction master's palm. The Vajra faction master's great strength palm was his specialty, and he had been practicing it for decades. Ordinary people would not be able to withstand it. However, when Zhang San and Li Si exchanged a palm strike with him, the three of them staggered as they stood up. Zhang San's expression was as usual. He laughed and said, "Everyone says that sect leader's Herculean Vajra palm can split mountains and split rocks. Seeing it today, it is only SOSO. So, those black-clothed men in the ruined temple were from the Isle of Heroes." The Vajra sect master's complexion turned ashen. It turned out that he had been careless and had suffered a loss in the previous exchange of palms. In his opinion, no matter how high Zhang San and Li Si's martial arts were, they could not compare to his nearly 100 years of cultivation. He was planning to break the two men's arms with the extremely firm and fierce Vajra palm to intimidate everyone and prevent them from having any other ideas later. Who would have thought that the inner energies of the two of them were extremely strange? One yin and one yang, using an extremely strange method to dissolve his palm energy. On the other hand, the yin and yang energies in his opponent's palms invaded his body, causing the true qi in his body to become extremely turbulent. Apart from the yin and yang attributes, there were also two extremely powerful poisons in their palms. They must have consumed poisons to cultivate on a daily basis, causing their true qi to be poisoned as well. The Vajra sect master had experienced this once before, when he and the Xianming elders had been escorting Zhao Min. However, they had encountered 18 mysterious masked men in the ruined temple. They did not know where those masked men had come from, but they were all extremely powerful. Coupled with the fact that the 18 of them had attacked together, the Vajra sect master and the Xianming elders were dumbfounded. In their terror, they had been beaten like dogs and had even caused Zhao Min to be captured. Fortunately, it did not take long for Song Qingshu to appear. Although it had been a sneak attack, he had instantly defeated the 18 experts. This battle had terrified the Vajra sect master. However, he recalled that although the black-clothed men's skills were high, they seemed to have relied on brute force. He had been frightened at first and had relied on his Vajra indestructible divine skill to fight them head-on, which was why he had ended up in such a sorry state. If he had been given another chance, with the help of the Xianming elders, he might not have been able to win against those 18 experts, but he would have had no problem protecting himself. However, there were no ifs in this world. Every time he thought about this, he would wring his hands and stamp his head. It was only after exchanging blows with Zhang San and Li Si that he realized those masked men were from the Island of Heroes. However, he had been too careless this time and had chosen to fight them head-on. As a result, he had suffered a loss right from the start. He was experienced and knowledgeable. Since he knew that they were from the Island of Heroes, he had naturally heard about their scorching flame pill and 99 pills. He immediately understood the source of the poisonous gas. Although these two poisons were overbearing, he had profound skills and was also skilled in the art of medicine, so he would not be poisoned by them. However, the Island of Heroes' specialty poisons still forced him to use some of his inner force to suppress them. He also had to use some of his inner force to neutralize the yin and yang qi that had invaded his body. Hence, he had fallen into a passive position right from the start. Zhang San and Li Si were very experienced. After creating an intimidating scene, they attacked without stopping. The master of the Vajra faction was focused on the chaotic vital qi and poison in his body, so he could only rely on his indestructible body to defend passively. He had lost count of how many times he had been hit. As expected, the expressions of the crowd changed. The heroic image of the master of the Vajra faction severely injuring the right emissary of light and the protector of the Ming dynasty was still vivid in their minds. They did not expect that he would be beaten so badly by Zhang San and Li Si. Morong Fu was also shocked. Just now, he had estimated that he was far inferior to the master of the Vajra faction. He did not expect that in the blink of an eye, the master of the Vajra faction would be beaten so badly by Zhang San and Li Si. He lived in Jiangnan and had heard of the name Zhang San and Li Si. However, he had always thought that it was just a rumor in Jianghu and did not take it seriously. In addition, although he was famous, he was not the leader of a faction. Therefore, Zhang San and Li Si would not come looking for him. It was only now that he realized how narrow his view was. Zhuo Bufan, who was beside him, was also dumbfounded. He had obtained the sword manual in Changbai Mountain and trained hard for several years. He thought that he had few opponents in the world, but ever since he returned to the Central Plains, he had suffered setbacks again and again. Now that he saw this scene, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. He was completely disheartened. Only Song Qing-shu knew the martial arts of Zhang San and Li Si the best. There were many masters on the island of heroes who became masters in a short period of time. The messengers of kindness and punishing evil were almost as good as Qiu Qianren, but their actual combat experience was too poor. They had completely relied on drugs to get to where they were. In the eyes of the top masters, their flaws were extremely obvious. Of course, if one were to recklessly compete with them in terms of inner power without knowing the truth, even the 5 masters of the universe might fail miserably. However, Zhang San and Li Si were different. They swept through the martial arts world once every 10 years. Although they did not provoke the real top sex, the fact that they could suppress the remaining half of the martial arts world by force was enough to prove the problem. The 2 of them were slightly weaker than the 5 masters of the universe, but they always acted together. They were 2 masters who were close to the 5 masters of the universe, be it in terms of inner power or combat experience. It was no wonder that even a master of the Vajra faction was defeated. Everyone's attention was focused on the battle between the 3 of them. Suddenly, a loud rumbling sound came from a door. The group of people quickly turned around and found that the exit had been blocked by a huge rock. Suddenly, they heard a shout, and a woman's voice said, "What kind of place do you think the Vulture Palace is? How can you behave so atrociously here? None of you will leave alive today." When the group of heroes saw this, they knew that they had fallen into the trap of the Vulture Palace. The group of people fought their way forward, killing or capturing the yellow-robed women. After entering the main hall, they also looked around to see if there were any ambushes. However, the life and death talismans on some of them were activated, and everyone was shocked. Animals hurt their own kind. Coupled with the series of unforeseen events that happened one after another, they did not expect to be in such a dangerous place. When they saw the huge rock blocking the entrance, they were all shocked. It's going to be very difficult to get out of the Vulture Palace today. However, whether it was Zhang San, Li Si, or the master of the Vajra faction, they turned a deaf ear to this change. After all, as long as they could get rid of the other party, they would be able to form an absolute suppression on the group of heroes. Chapter 1850. After blocking a few attacks from Zhang San and Li Si, the leader of the Vajra faction finally caught his breath and spoke. He yelled at the other side, "Bai Wanjian, are you a dead man? Come and help me." Bai Wanjian's expression darkened. Normally, the leader of the Vajra faction was arrogant and had great martial arts skills. Not only would he not be grateful when someone came forward to help him, he would even yell at them, thinking that they were looking down on him. Who knew that this time, the leader would help him? However, since the leader had spoken up and they were on the same side, Bai Wanjian could not just stand by and watch. He led a few brothers of the Snow Mountain sect to form a sword formation and rushed over, blocking Li Si on behalf of the leader of the Vajra faction. Get lost. Li Si was furious. He and Zhang San had managed to injure the leader of the Vajra faction right from the start, and should have been able to subdue him after another 100 moves. However, the leader's interruption might have turned the tables. After all, the leader of the Vajra faction's Vajra indestructible divine technique was quite difficult to deal with. He was anxious, and naturally, he did not show any mercy. The sword formation of the Snow Mountain sect was very strict. It was more than enough to deal with ordinary people of the Jianghu, but it was not enough to deal with Li Si, who was feared by the Jianghu. Li Si moved like lightning, constantly dodging and moving. He was clearly alone, but in the eyes of the surrounding heroes, it was as if he had surrounded the entire Snow Mountain sect. P. The people of the Snow Mountain sect fell one after another. Within a few breaths, Bai Wanjian was the only one left. Pa, the young leader of the Snow Mountain sect, Bai Wanjian's martial arts skills had been taught by Mr. Wade and by Zazai. His sword techniques were much stronger than those of the disciples around him. Unfortunately, even Bai Zazai was no match for Li Si, let alone him. Realizing the danger, Bai Wanjian did not dare to hold back. He immediately used the ultimate move of the Snow Mountain sword technique, the bright moon chong flute. The people around him could vaguely feel a bright moon rising. Gradually, there were sounds of sobbing, like the sound of a chong flute. Suddenly, a murderous atmosphere spread. However, a large black hand suddenly appeared in the bright moon, forcibly breaking through the moon and pressing down fiercely. The flute-like sound also disappeared without a trace. It was only then that the crowd noticed that Bai Wanjian was vomiting blood and retreating. The long sword in his hand was already broken into pieces. Li Si chased after Bai Wanjian like a maggot in a tarsal bone. He intended to get rid of this threat once and for all before joining forces with Zhang San to deal with the Vajra faction master. Bai Wanjian is doomed. The surrounding people all had the same thought. However, they were not related to Bai Wanjian, so naturally, they would not fight against the great demon Li Si for him. Even if they did, no one had the ability to do so. The Island Masters and Cave Masters thought that even if they were to fight against Bai Wanjian, they might not be able to win, let alone Li Si. Father. Just then, a young girl suddenly exclaimed from above. Although her voice was clear and melodious, everyone could hear the panic in her voice. Pale red figure pounced down from above, brandishing her sword at Li Si in an attempt to save the heavily injured Bai Wanjian. Li Si snorted and broke the thin sword in the girl's hand with a slap. Then, he took the opportunity to slap her forehead. If Zhang San was here, perhaps he would have some tender feelings for the fairer sex, but he had a heart of stone. How could he show any mercy? Sigh. It's a pity that a little beauty has perished just like that. There were many people with good eyesight, and they could already tell that the figure was a beautiful and refined young girl. Everyone loved beauty, and they all felt that it was a pity. There was a loud bang, and the scene of brains splattering everywhere that everyone had imagined did not happen. Instead, a black figure shot back, and the person seemed to be imprinted on the wall. Beating someone like hanging a painting? The crowd looked over and realized that the person hanging on the wall was none other than the awe-inspiring Li Si. Everyone's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. What's going on? The group of people immediately turned around and saw that the girl in red, who was about to fall to the ground from the recoil, was standing there with a young man holding her waist. The person who had attacked, was naturally Song Qing-shu. He had originally thought that the mess in the hall was too much, and he was about to come out and end it all. Coincidentally, he saw the girl he had saved earlier in danger, and he naturally made a move. Didn't you say that your surname is Sure? Song Qing-shu looked at the girl beside him. How could he not understand that this Xiao was the heroine of the Guild of Chivalry, Bai Wanjian's beloved daughter, Bai Xiao? The girl's face reddened, and she explained softly, my grandmother and my grandfather had a falling out, and they didn't allow me to use the surname Bai, so they made me use the surname Sure. I didn't mean to deceive Big Brother. Is that so? Song Qing-shu said lightly. You insisted on following me to the Vulture Palace. I'm afraid you were worried that something would happen to your father when I came. Pa Xiao lowered her head, and her face was like the petals of a white plum flower. Tears streamed down her delicate face, and she said, I'm sorry, Big Brother. Looking at the girl's gentle and weak appearance, Song Qing-shu really couldn't harden his heart to blame her. This time, a woman's voice suddenly sounded from above. Granny Tong's 4 servant girls greet the new Supreme Lord. Everyone looked up and saw that near the roof of the hall, there were 9 rocks protruding out. They seemed to be 9 small platforms, and on each of the 4 rocks was a young girl of 18 or 19 years old, and they were bowing down gracefully. The 4 girls bowed, and then leaped down. In midair, they each held a long sword in their hands and floated down. The 4 girls one dressed in light red, one in white, one in light green, and one in light yellow, leaped down at the same time and landed on the ground at the same time. They bowed down to Song Ching Shu and said, "Your servant girls came late. Please forgive us, master." Song Ching Shu flicked his sleeve, and a gentle force lifted the four girls up. "You don't have to be so polite." He remembered that when Granny Tong fought with Li Qiushui and fought to win him over, she seemed to have mentioned that she had four beautiful little servant girls. It must be them. Feeling the unstoppable gentleness of the force, the four girls were shocked, but it was quickly replaced by greater joy. Their new master's martial arts skills were so strong. The Vulture Palace could be saved from this disaster. They raised their heads, and the crowd was even more shocked. They saw that not only were the four girls exactly the same height, short, fat, and thin, there was not the slightest difference in their appearance. They all had the same oval face, eyes like lacquer, delicate and beautiful. The only difference was the color of their clothes. The girl in light red said, "Your servant girls and the four sisters are twins. Granny Tong named your servant Mei Jian, and these three sisters are Orchid Jian, Bamboo Jian, and Chrysanthemum Jian. Just now, we met Hao Yin, Zhu Tian, and the other sisters, and found out about the situation. Now your servant girls have closed the door of the Hall of Solitary Respect. As to how to deal with these bold and rebellious servants, I leave it to Master to decide." When the crowd heard her say that the four sisters were twins, they suddenly understood. No wonder the four of them looked exactly the same. They saw that the four of them were beautiful, and their voices were clear and gentle, so they all had a good impression of them. But who would have thought that Mei Jian would say something like a bunch of audacious, rebellious slaves, which was extremely rude. Two men rushed forward. One was holding a saber, the other was holding a pair of judge pens. They shouted together, "Little girl, your filthy mouth." Suddenly there was a flash of green light. The Orchid Jian and Bamboo Jian sisters' swords swept out, followed by two dang sounds. The two men's wrists were cut, their hands and their weapons fell to the ground. This move was extremely fast. The two men's wrists were cut, but their mouths were still saying, "What a fart." "Ouch!" They cried in unison and leaped back, leaving the ground covered with blood. The two women had cut the two men's wrists in one move. Although the rest of the people knew that their martial arts were much higher than the two men, they did not dare to act rashly. Moreover, they saw that the walls of the hall were made of unusually thick granite, and they did not know what kind of formidable mechanism was hidden in the hall. Moreover, there was that enigmatic young man. They did not know if it was him who had beaten the great demon king Li Si into that state. So who would dare to act rashly? They looked at each other in dismay, but nobody said anything. They were all cursing in their hearts that those two reckless men deserved it. Song Ching Shu's eyes lit up. She was indeed worthy of being Old Tong's personal maidservant. Her swordsmanship had surpassed who knows how many Jianghu masters. But he knew that there were more important things to do now. So he took a step forward and said calmly, "Those whose hands are stained with the lives of the Vulture Palace's people will pay with their lives. Those who have injured the Vulture Palace's people will have their hands and legs broken. Those whose hands are not stained with blood will be punished with 80 lashes. Who has any objections?" Chapter 1851. As soon as he said this, the entire hall was in an uproar. During this period of time, they had gone through many dangers to attack the Vulture Palace. Both sides were in a killing frenzy. Who didn't have a few lives on their hands? If they were to carry out this plan, how many people here would be spared? "Little brat, you talk big." A burly man leaped out like an iron tower. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like an injured tiger. He raised his fist that was like an iron bowl, and with a bang, he smashed a tea table into pieces. Then, he rushed towards Song Ching Shu. Someone around him had already recognized him. "Lord of Iron Ao Island. Lord of Iron Ao Island. Tyrant Ha." It turned out that Song Ching Shu's movements were too fast. Not many people saw how Li Si was sent flying. They thought it was some mysterious master hiding in the dark. As for a young man like Song Ching Shu, most of the island lords and cave masters didn't care about him at all. Tyrant Ha usually looked down on pretty boys, and the person in front of him fit his definition of a pretty boy. When he heard his arrogant words, he couldn't help but jump out. The surrounding island masters and cave masters rejoiced in Song Qingshu's misfortune, but it was also good for him to test that person's strength. Among those present, only the expressions of Murong Fu, Zhuobu Fan, and the others changed greatly, because they recognized Song Qingshu's identity. Zhu Jian, who was standing in front, saw Tyrant Ha's terrifying expression. She forgot about her powerful swordsmanship and was scared. She quickly hid in Song Qingshu's arms. Tyrant Ha opened his fan-like hand and grabbed towards Mei Jian. The four twin sisters were telepathically connected. Zhu Jian was so frightened that her whole body trembled. Mei Jian had already sensed it. Seeing Big Ha pouncing over, she cried out in alarm and hid behind Song Qingshu. Song Qingshu had a strange expression on his face. This little girl was really shameless. They had just met, and she took the initiative to throw herself into his arms. However, he had read countless people and quickly understood that the other party was not the kind of seductive slut that he had imagined. Instead, it was a natural reaction because she was too young and timid. Previously, he had praised Heavenly Mountain Tonglao too early. Although the maid's swordsmanship was not bad, they had not seen the real world and could not react in time when they were in danger. In this short period of time, Hadaba was already in front of Song Qingshu. Seeing that Song Qingshu still had no intention of attacking, Granny Yu, Sister Shi, Cheng Qingshuang, and the others couldn't help but feel nervous. Although they knew that their new High Lord's martial arts were unparalleled, it was likely that he would be injured if he just stood there and let the enemy attack him. However, to everyone's surprise, when Big Tyrant Ha was only 3 feet away from Song Qingshu, it was as if he had crashed into an invisible wall. He let out a miserable scream and staggered a few steps before finally collapsing to the ground. Everyone looked down and saw that his face was badly mutilated, as if he had crashed into a boulder at full speed. It seemed that he would not survive. You overestimate yourself. Li Si had already struggled to pull his body out from the wall. When he saw this scene, he couldn't help but blurt out an idiom. Is this a protective chi wall? There was no lack of people with good eyesight. Martial arts experts often had protective chi, and those with higher cultivation could even cover their body with chi. However, covering 1 or 2 inches was already the limit. The distance just now should have been about 3 feet, right? Even if this young man started practicing martial arts in his mother's womb, it was impossible for him to have such a terrifying inner strength. Not to mention him, even in the entire martial arts world, no one had heard of anyone having a protective chi wall of 3 feet. However, although they hadn't seen it before, there were people present who had. Whether it was Murong Fu or Zhuobu Fan, they had all seen him fight. Sect Master Jingang, Zhang San, and Li Si had also lost him. Naturally, they knew that this seemingly gentle young master was not to be trifled with. Greetings, Golden Snake King. Greetings, King Qi. Greetings, Brother Song. Greetings, Prince Song. Everyone bowed in unison. Even Zhang San and Sect Master Jingang, who had been fighting to the death, stopped. Oh, why did you stop? Song Qingshu glanced at the two of them and said with a faint smile. They all cursed in their hearts. With you here, how the hell are we going to fight? However, their expressions became increasingly respectful. How would we dare to be presumptuous before the young master? Sect Master Jingang smiled obsequiously. He had been defeated several times by this young man and had personally seen him defeat 18 top-notch experts in one move. Moreover, he had even taken his 3 corpses mind pill. How could he muster up the courage to fight? If we had known that King Qi had become the new master of Vulture Palace, we brothers wouldn't have rushed here. Zhang San was still smiling, but his smile was uglier than a crying face. When the crowd witnessed this scene, they were greatly astonished. Whether it was Zhang San or the guardian deity sect master, both of them were so awe-inspiring that either of them was enough to intimidate everyone present. However, such figures were now acting so servile in front of that young man. Not to mention the ordinary island masters and cave masters. Even Zhuobu Fan was scared out of his wits. He stood there trembling. There seemed to be an invisible pressure in the air, causing everyone to tremble in fear. Especially those whose hands were stained with the lives of Vulture Palace's people. Their hearts were like dead ashes. Among them, only Morong Fu was in a slightly better state, mainly because he had been defeated by Song Qingshu several times. At this moment, he was already numb to it, especially when he thought that this visit to Vulture Palace was the last chance of his life. Now that his hopes had been dashed, he understood that he had no hope of restoring his country in this lifetime. He stood there in a daze and was not at all affected by Song Qingshu. "Greetings, Supreme Lord." At this moment, the palace servants of Zhu Qian'an divisions had already surrounded the place. Seeing this, they formally kowtowed to their new master. Led by them, the island masters and cave masters also knelt down and called out Supreme Lord. Feeling the overwhelming momentum in the hall, even an outsider like Ashio could not help but kneel down. She was a little puzzled, but thinking that kneeling to her big brother did not seem to be a big deal, she continued to kneel there. Staying here will only lead to death. It's better to fight to the death. No matter how powerful he is, he's only one person. How many of us can survive? Everyone rush out one by one. The 36 islands and 72 caves had no shortage of people who lived on the edge of knife. When they heard what he just said, they knew that they would definitely die, so they simply made up their minds and rushed out. Their plan was wishful thinking. At this time, the people of Juqian divisions were kneeling, and the periphery was no longer defended. With so many of them rushing out together, even if the other party had 3 heads and 6 arms, how many of them could he stop? As long as they could get out of this solitary hall, they would have their lives saved. As for the talisman of life and death, it would take at least a few more months to activate. This way, they could at least get a few months back. In order to survive, these people burst out with all their potential, and their lightness skills seemed to be 3 times faster than usual. Seeing that the fastest one was about to rush out of the hall, the remaining island masters and cave masters could not help but feel a little restless. At this moment, a faint voice rang out. "Without my permission, who can leave?" Then, a large green sword light appeared out of thin air. The people present were already impressed when they saw Zhuo Buffon's 1-foot-long sword light, but now they knew what it meant to be a frog at the bottom of a well. The bright sword light streaked across the sky, and there was a strange kind of shock. The people only felt their vision go black and their hands and feet go numb. They did not dare to move a finger. When the sword light gradually dissipated, the heroes finally regained their vision, and the group of people who fled in panic were all beheaded without exception. Chapter 1852. Thank you, Master, for avenging our sacrificed sisters. Their voices echoed in the hall, and even the other members of the 9th Heaven Division began to shout. Obviously, they admired and sympathized with the Great Heaven Division for the sacrifices they had made to protect the Vulture Palace. Seeing their excited faces, Song Qingshu sighed inwardly. In the past few months, the Great Heaven Division had defended the Vulture Palace with the help of the geographical advantage. During this period, they had fought many bloody battles and sacrificed many of their comrades. However, in the original work, Shuju had simply bypassed those troublemakers and even pulled out the life-death notes for them. It was so pedantic and ridiculous. At that time, those island lords and cave masters had shed tears of gratitude and said that they would go through fire and water for Shuju in the future. However, without any restrictions, if something changed in the future, how could these wily old foxes really risk their lives for Shuju? As for the people of the Vulture Palace, they must have been very disappointed when they saw this result. However, Shuju was the master, so even if they were dissatisfied, they could only suppress it in their hearts. As for the people of the Vulture Palace, they were sincerely convinced by Shuju. How could the people of the Vulture Palace not have any thoughts about it? "Master, please have mercy on us." As if they could sense the faint killing intent gathering in the air, the island masters and cave masters kowtowed one after another, as if they were pounding garlic. They had witnessed a group of people with martial arts similar to theirs charge out, only to be easily killed in an instant. Who would still dare to think of rebelling? Only then did Song Qing-shu say, "Since you didn't run away just now, it is obvious that your sins are not as serious as those people. At the same time, you're also repentant. In this case, you will be flogged 40 times and then kowtow to the sacrifice sisters of the Great Heaven Division to apologize." "Thank you, Master, for your mercy." "Thank you, Master." The group of people cried tears of joy. They originally thought that they would be skinned alive, but they didn't expect that the punishment would be lighter than they had imagined. Although kowtowing to those girls was a bit shameful, losing face was nothing compared to losing their lives or having their limbs broken. The palace servants of the Vulture Palace had no objections. Killing that bunch of people just now had already allowed them to avenge the blood feud they had accumulated over this period of time. Song Qing-shu nodded. Killing the chicken to warn the monkey was enough. He didn't want these island masters and cave masters to suffer too much. After all, he still needed them to fight back against Li Liangzhua. However, he wouldn't be stupid enough to remove the life-death notes from them again. The life-death notes were indeed an effective way to control them. As long as the rewards and punishments were clear and they weren't too temperamental, they wouldn't rebel. At the very least, even if they were as temperamental as Grandma Tong, they would only rebel when something went wrong with their cultivation. At this moment, someone screamed shrilly and rolled out of the crowd. My life-death notes are activated." As he spoke, he clawed at his face. Soon, his clawed hands left streaks of blood. Soon, his body was drenched in blood. "It's the big monster of the twin monsters of Pearl Cliff." Someone beside him shouted out his identity. "Big brother, big brother." The second monster of the Pearl Cliff duo was anxiously pacing around, but there was nothing he could do. Suddenly, he saw Song Qing-shu at the side, and like a drowning man who had found a life-saving straw, he hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed. "Supreme Lord, please save my big brother." Song Qing-shu exclaimed in his heart, just in time. He helped Jian up from his bosom and stood to the side, then walked over. Seeing that the Pearl Cliff Great Monster was desperately scratching its chest, he instantly sealed its acupoints, then took out a small pill for it to swallow. Then, he circulated his qi to help the pill's efficacy disperse, and the Pearl Cliff Great Monster gradually calmed down. It's the antidote to the life-death notes. Everyone's eyes widened. In fact, they didn't have much hope. This new lord was good at martial arts, not medicine. They didn't know when their life-death talismans became the talismans of death. However, now that they saw that he had the antidote, they couldn't help but reignite their hope of survival. Song Qing-shu stood up and lightly said, "This is only a temporary antidote. It can only suppress the poison in your body for a year. However, you don't need to be too disappointed. From now on, as long as you can complete the missions I give you, I will give you the antidote. Don't worry, my missions won't be as difficult as Old Lady Tong's." "Thank you for your grace, my lord." The group of people kowtowed and thanked him. As for his criticism of Heavenly Mountain Tonglao, even the people of Zhouqian'an divisions didn't think there was anything wrong with his words. Soon, the people of Zhouqian'an divisions disarmed the island masters and cave masters and escorted them to the prison. Only then did Song Qing-shu turn to look at the rest of the people. "Now it's your turn." The leader of the Vajra faction hurriedly smiled and said, "Young master, we didn't hurt a single hair of the lady in the Vulture Palace. Please, young master, please." Zhang San, Li Si, Murong Fu, and the others looked askance at him. They thought, "You're a grandmaster after all. Isn't it a little too much to be so servile?" Song Qing-shu snorted. "Is that so? But before I went up the mountain, I saw your disciples bullying a little girl." "I'm sure you've done this many times?" Ashio couldn't help but exclaim. Realizing that he was standing up for her, she was happy and terrified at the same time. Coupled with her natural shyness, she couldn't help but feel awkward in front of so many people. She blushed and didn't know where to put her hands. Bai Wanjian saw this and knew what was going on. He was furious. "Leader of the Vajra faction, how dare you let your people bully my daughter?" The leader of the Vajra faction cursed in his heart. If your daughter hadn't found such a powerful backer, I would have slapped you to death for talking to me like this. However, he didn't dare to show the slightest emotion. He squeezed out a smile and said, "Young Master Bai, please forgive me. My people had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. I'll chop off their third leg when I get back." Song Qing-shu said calmly, "There's no need for that. I've already taken care of them." Yes. They didn't have eyes and deserved to die. The leader of the Vajra faction nodded and bowed. "I wonder if the princess has been well recently. The Great Khan and the Ryong prince miss her so much that they've asked about her a few times." Song Qing-shu smiled faintly and said, "Why? Are you afraid that I'll kill you? So you brought up the princess?" No. The leader of the Vajra faction said hurriedly, "We're the princess subordinates, so we're naturally your subordinates as well. If you want our lives, you don't have to do it yourself. Just say the word, and we'll offer our lives." Li Si, who had always been straightforward, couldn't stand it anymore. "Bootlicker, you stink." The leader of the Vajra faction glared at him. "Umph. Young master, you're a heavenly genius. You're an immortal who's descended to the mortal world. It's a blessing that you've cultivated for a few lifetimes to be able to serve under young master. What do you know?" This time, even Song Qing-shu couldn't stand it anymore. He waved his hand and said, "Get out of here." The leader of the Vajra faction was overjoyed. Yes. I'll get out now." Chapter 1853. The Vajra faction master groaned inwardly. "What orders do you have for me, young master?" Song Qing-shu said, "Go back and restrain your disciples. If I hear any news of them abusing women, I'll make your Vajra faction disappear from this world." Yes. I definitely won't. Please rest assured, young master." The Vajra faction master hurriedly promised as he broke out in a cold sweat. "Let's go." Song Qing-shu finally waved his hand. The Vajra faction master felt as if he had just been pardoned and disappeared out the door as if he was fleeing. Whether it was Zhang San, Li Si, or Murong Fu, all of them were puzzled. The Vajra faction master's martial arts were unfathomable. Even if he could not defeat Song Qing-shu, there was no need for him to act in such a manner. Of course, they did not know that the Vajra faction master had been poisoned by Song Qing-shu's 3-corpse brain divine pill in that rundown temple and had been brainwashed by Song Qing-shu's soul-shifting technique. Therefore, the Vajra faction master was like a mouse that had seen a cat. Song Qing-shu's gaze then fell on the remaining people. "How should I deal with you guys?" Murong Fu stretched his neck and snorted. "Since things have come to this, I'll do whatever you want of me. However, if you want me to wag my tail and beg for mercy like the Vajra faction master, that's impossible." Song Qing-shu nodded inwardly. Although Murong Fu's martial arts were mediocre and his mind was not very clear, he still had the strength of character. Perhaps it had something to do with the fact that he had always regarded the restoration of his country as his own responsibility. In his heart, he had always regarded himself as the emperor, and an emperor would naturally not be servile to others. It wasn't that he didn't have the thought of taking Chen Yuliang in for his own use, but in the end, he gave up on the idea. It wasn't that he was afraid of Chen Yuliang's ambition. No matter how great Murong Fu's ambition was, it couldn't be greater than Chen Yuliang's. The key was that Murong Fu's brain wasn't very good. In order to restore his country, he always came up with messy ideas. But if he were to be killed, in the past, he had also helped to restore his meridians. Although he had already repaid the debt of gratitude, personally killing him would be somewhat inauspicious. More importantly, he still didn't know where that madman, Murong Bo, was. If he were to kill the sole descendant of Murong family, and he began to retaliate, he wouldn't be afraid. But he had so many subordinates under him, and there were so many beauties, but not many of them could defeat Murong Bo. If we really want to reach that step, we have to control Murong Bo first. Song Qing-shu made up his mind and said, "Considering our past friendship, I won't kill you for the time being, but you can still be punished." As soon as he finished speaking, a few transparent objects shot out from his hand. How could Murong Fu react in time? He felt a cold and numb sensation coming from a few acupoints on his body. His face couldn't help but change. What did you do to me? Song Qing said lightly. Didn't Prince Murong and these devils attack Vulture Palace because you wanted to see the life and death talisman of Heavenly Mountain Tong Lao? Since that's the case, I will fulfill your wish. Life and death talisman? Murong Fu's face changed drastically. Soon, a strange itch came from his body. Soon, he couldn't stand anymore and began to wail on the ground. The surrounding women of Vulture Palace were all delighted. My lord's divine power is unparalleled, and you also have a life and death talisman. For thousands of years, you will unify the Jianghu. Song Qing was speechless. He thought, where did you learn these catchphrases? I'm not like Ding Chunxiu or Dongfang Bubi. He waved his hand and interrupted their flattery. He took the opportunity to throw an antidote into Murong Fu's mouth and said to her, now that you have the life and death talisman in your body, as long as you don't do anything stupid to harm me, I will give you the antidote on time every year. The itch on Murong Fu's body finally subsided, but the feeling of wishing for death was still fresh in his mind. When he thought that not only did he fail to conquer Vulture Palace, but he was also controlled by the life and death talisman like those island masters and cave masters, his heart was like dead ashes. He let the people of Vulture Palace take him away. Song Qing then turned to Zhang San and Li Si and said, it's your turn. Zhang San and Li Si looked at each other and laughed bitterly. Our lives are in King Qi's hands. However, we hope that King Qi will be lenient on account of the fact that the Isle of Heroes has never had any major conflict with you. No major conflict? Song Qing thought about how he had killed 18 of their top-notch experts in the ruined temple, learned the Supreme Mystery Sutra on the Isle of Heroes, and was also related to Jia Baoyu's death. If they knew the truth, they would probably want to grind his bones to dust. However, now that he thought about it, he did not seem to have revealed his true identity. It is not that I cannot let you go, but what good will it do me? Song Qing said indifferently. Zhang San and Li Si represented the face of the Isle of Heroes. If he killed them, it would mean that he was officially at war with the Isle of Heroes. Now that he had so many enemies, it would be unwise to make more enemies. Hearing that there was hope, Zhang San and Li Si hurriedly said, from today onwards, the Isle of Heroes will stay far away from King Qi's territory. Oh, a strange expression appeared on Song Qingshu's face. In the past, Duke Wen of Jin retreated far away and defeated the state of Chu in the Battle of Qingpu. Zhang San hurriedly said, we do not have such intentions. Very well. Song Qingshu nodded. However, I doubt that you have such great authority. Do you have the final say in the affairs of the Isle of Heroes? Zhang San said, normally, the two island masters are not around, and Zhao De and Qianair are elusive. We brothers are in charge of the day-to-day affairs. Song Qingshu asked, what is the identity of Zhao De and Qianair? I feel that they're even more mysterious than the island masters. Zhang San smiled bitterly. Reporting to King Qi, this is the highest secret of the Isle of Heroes. Even if you kill us, we cannot say anything. Otherwise, even if we escape with our lives, our fates will be even more miserable. So secretive. Song Qingshu sneered. Fine. Even if you do not say anything, I can roughly guess. Let's go. Remember what you said today. Thank you, King Qi. After thanking him, Zhang San and Li Si hurriedly walked out of the hall. Outside the hall, the two could not help but whisper. Does he really know the identity of Zhao De and Qianair? I don't think so. Both of them are very mysterious. There are less than 5 people on the Isle of Heroes who know about them. And it seems that he is bluffing. Let's go back and report this to the Island Master. In the solitary hall, Song Qingshu looked at the remaining people of the Snow Mountain sect in silence. Xiu hurriedly said, Big brother, can you let my father and the others go? The Snow Mountain sect is under the control of the Mongols. This was done by the Khan. My father and the others had no choice. Bai Wanjian hurriedly pulled his daughter back. Xiu, your father has always been upright. There is no need to beg others. In the Snow Mountain sect, there are only those who die in battle. No one surrenders. Father, Xiu stamped her feet anxiously. Song Qingshu looked at the girl who was about to cry. Xiao, why were you alone when I met you? Chapter 1854. A Mongolian Prince? Song Qingshu raised his eyebrows. Which Mongolian prince? Xiao blushed again. I don't know. Bai Wanjian replied. Actually, the specific candidate has not been decided yet. It was just an intention. Who knew that this girl would accidentally hear it and run away? Xiao's face turned even redder. I don't want to marry. Bai Wanjian frowned and said, the Mongols have already unified the world. With the status of their princes, I wonder how many girls want to be their wives. Why would they be so hesitant like you? Xiao was so wrong that she was about to cry. She bit her lips and did not speak. The tears in her eyes seemed to fall at any time. Song Qingshu secretly shook his head. The Snow Mountain sect was planning to curry favor with the powerful. However, with the status of the Snow Mountain sect, it would be good enough for Xiao to be a concubine. This was only if they gave her face. They might not even accept her, even if they gave her face. Xiao is now my sister. If she doesn't want to, no one can force her to marry. Looking at Xiao's tear-stained face, Song Qingshu felt pity for her. Bai Wanjian frowned. Prince Song is too nosy. After all, this is the Snow Mountain sect's internal affairs. So what? Song Qingshu said faintly. In this chaotic world, young sect leader Bai still wants to talk about rules with me. Isn't it too pedantic? The reason why I can control it is not because of my own strength, but because of my friendship with the Mongolian higher-ups. As long as I say one word, no prince will marry her. You. Bai Wanjian's face instantly turned red. However, he knew that what he said was the truth. Everyone knew that he had an ambiguous relationship with the Ruyang Palace. He also played a very important role in the peace negotiations between the Southern Song and Mongolia. It was obvious what the Mongolian higher-ups would choose between such a person and the Snow Mountain sect. Song Qingshu smiled at Xiao. Xiao, don't be afraid. No one can force you to marry someone you don't like. Thank you, big brother. Xiao showed a hint of happiness, but soon she looked at her father worriedly. But my father, Song Qingshu answered, don't worry. Your father and the master of the Vajra sect are behind us, just like the mantis stalking the cicada. They haven't killed anyone from the Vulture Palace. I won't make things difficult for him. Xiao was so excited that she jumped up. That's great. Seeing her excited look, Song Qingshu couldn't help but smile. This kind of girlish feeling would gradually disappear as she grew older, and now was the time when she was at her most charming. Bai Wanjian cupped his hands and said, thank you for your magnanimity. We dare not disturb you anymore. Farewell. After all, he wasn't a person who couldn't tell right from wrong. Although he was a little angry at the other party for interfering in his family's affairs, he still had the necessary etiquette. Song Qingshu nodded. Now that the Spirit Vulture Palace was in ruins, he still needed time to deal with the various issues after the war. Bai Wanjian took a few steps and saw that his daughter was not moving from Song Qingshu's side. He couldn't help but feel annoyed. Xiao, I'm leaving. Xiao was a little reluctant in her heart, but she also understood that it was not convenient for a girl like her to be by a man's side. So she reluctantly said to Song Qingshu, big brother, I'm leaving. Will I see you again in the future? Song Qingshu smiled slightly. Of course you can. The Vulture Palace welcomes you at any time. If I have the chance in the future, I will come to the Snow Mountain sect to look for you. Really? Xiao was a little surprised. That's a promise. That's a promise. Song Qingshu smiled and nodded. Although the Snow Mountain sect was not a small sect in the West region, it was insignificant in the world. It was not worth going to, but with this pearl, it was a different story. Beside him, Bai Wanjian's face darkened. He thought to himself, Xiao, you really don't want to marry the Mongolian prince. Could it be that you want to marry that Song guy? On the way down the mountain, Bai Wanjian looked at his excited daughter and couldn't help but say, Xiao, you don't want to marry the Mongolian prince. Do you want to marry that Song guy? Xiao blushed and said coquettishly, of course not. Daddy, don't make fun of me. That's good. Bai Wanjian snorted. Song guy is a famous playboy in Jianghu. I don't know how many women he has around him. Even the princess of the Ruyang Palace of Mongolia is one of them. A silly girl like you will be swallowed whole if you send yourself to him. Daddy, I really don't want that. Ashio pouted coquettishly and rode the camel to the front. When she was out of sight, her originally happy and relaxed expression couldn't help but become gloomy. Meanwhile, in the solitary hall, Song Qingshu arranged for people to clean up the mess. However, among the 9 divisions of Jiuqian, only the Great Heaven Division suffered heavy losses. The other 8 divisions were well preserved. With the addition of Granny Yu, Sister Sure, and other highly respected people, the aftermath was quickly arranged, and he didn't have to do it himself. Looking at the chattering plum, orchid, bamboo, and chrysanthemum beside him, Song Qingshu couldn't help but sigh. The world was really full of strange things. There were actually quadruplets. Besides the color of their clothes, they were exactly the same. It was really hard to tell them apart. Originally, the 4 maidservants Plum, Orchid, Bamboo, and Chrysanthemum were serving Heaven Mountain Maiden. Now that their master had suddenly been changed to a young man, their heartbeat involuntarily quickened and their breathing quickened. They felt a little strange. However, they were still young and had grown up in Vulture Palace. They didn't know much about the affairs of the world, so they didn't think too much about it. That's right. When those island masters and cave masters attacked, where were you? Song Qingshu asked curiously. I didn't see you in the main hall. Bamboo Jian answered. When those servants attacked the palace, the sisters of the Great Heaven Division were all captured. The 4 of us saw that we couldn't resist the enemy, so we fled to the secret room where Old Lady Tong practiced martial arts. We only hoped that we could think of a way to save them when it was dark. A secret room for practicing martial arts? Song Qingshu's curiosity was piqued. Take me to see it. Yes. Now that he was the new master of Vulture Palace, in addition to the fact that he had intimidated the crowd, the 4 maidservants had long been convinced by him. They didn't have the slightest objection. Plum, Orchid, Chrysanthemum, and Bamboo led Song Qingshu to the back garden. They moved away a fake mountain and revealed the entrance to the tunnel. Plum Jian held a torch high and led the way. The 5 of them entered in a line. Along the way, Plum Jian kept pressing the trigger in a hidden place to prevent the hidden weapon traps from being activated. The tunnel twisted and turned, spiraling downwards. Sometimes it would suddenly open up, revealing a huge stone cave. It was obvious that the tunnel was formed by the natural cave in the belly of the mountain. Along the way, Bamboo Jian explained the situation of their hiding place. Orchid Jian couldn't help but sigh. Actually, that was just our way of repaying Old Lady Tong's kindness. If Master hadn't come, we would have inevitably lost our lives in the hands of those servants. Hearing the young girls calling him Master, even though Song Qingshu had a lot of experience, he still felt refreshed. Chapter 1855. Song Qingshu was surprised. Why not? Is it dangerous inside? Mei Jian said, It's not dangerous. This is an important place. The maids don't dare to enter. Song Qingshu realized that the original work did mention this. It contained the most profound martial arts of the Xiaoyao sect. If one's internal energy was not enough, it would be useless to look at it, and it would be easy for one to go mad. In the original work, Shuzhu let them in, and they almost lost their lives. Of course, Song Qingshu didn't need to say this now. He might as well do them a favor. Let's go in together. What's the big deal? The tunnel outside is so narrow, it's not comfortable to stand. The 4 beauties looked at each other and were pleasantly surprised. Mei Jian said, Master, before Granny passed away, she told us that if we serve you faithfully, do not do anything wrong, and practice martial arts diligently, then when we are 40 years old, she will allow us to come to this stone room for 1 day a year to study the martial arts on the walls. Even if you don't disregard Granny's promise, it will be 22 years later. Song Qingshu said with a smile, Wouldn't it be boring to wait for another 22 years? You will be old by then. Why would you want to learn martial arts? Let's go in together. The 4 beauties were overjoyed and immediately knelt down to worship him. Song Qingshu smiled and didn't care. Anyway, he was here, and even if something went wrong with these girls, he could save them. He might as well use this opportunity to buy their hearts. The five of them walked into the stone chamber and saw that the walls were polished smooth. The stone walls were engraved with innumerable circles about a foot in diameter. Each circle was engraved with all kinds of pictures. Some were human figures, some were animal figures, some were incomplete characters, and some were only marks and lines. Beside the circles were numbers such as a 1, a 2, a 1, a 2, and so on. There were at least 800 to 900 circles, if not more than 1,000. How could they see all of them in such a short time? Song Qing-shu secretly sighed. Pan Lang was really a genius in the past. He was able to study so many martial arts, but he didn't know if he was the one who studied it or if he borrowed the knowledge of others. Zhu Jian said, "Let's look at the drawing of a 1 first. Master, do you agree?" Song Qing-shu nodded his head. The five of them raised their torches and looked at the circle marked a 1. With one look, they recognized what was drawn on the circle. It was the first stance of the Tianshan plum snapping hand. They said, "This is the Tianshan plum snapping hand." When he looked at A2, it was indeed the second move of the Tianshan plum snapping hand. He continued to read. After the Tianshan plum snapping hand was finished, it was the Tianshan 6 yang palm. Although Song Qing-shu had never learned it before, he already knew the essence of this martial art after sparring with Old Tong. Now that he had verified it with these illustrations, he had a general understanding of it. When one's martial arts reached such a high level, one would naturally be able to master everything. Learning these things was quite fast. Song Qing-shu had never seen Tong Lao use the moves after the 6 yang palms of Tianshan on the stone wall. Following the instructions on the diagram, he circulated his internal energy. After learning only a few moves, his body was as light as a feather, as if he was floating in the air. Song Qing-shu was secretly amazed. The Xiaoyao Pai's martial arts were indeed miraculous. While he was concentrating on circulating his internal energy, suddenly he heard two cries of alarm. Song Qing-shu opened his eyes. He saw Lan Jian and Zhu Jian, 2 beauties, swayed and fell to the ground. Mei and Zhu, 2 beauties, held onto the stone wall. Their faces changed greatly, and they swayed. Naturally, Song Qing-shu knew what was going on. He went over to help Lan and Zhu up and pretended to ask, "What's wrong?" Mei Jian said, Master, our internal energy is low. We can't look at these drawings. We will wait outside." The 4 beauties held onto the stone wall and slowly walked out of the stone room. He saw the 4 beauties were sitting cross-legged in the middle of the corridor, cultivating their internal energy. Their bodies were trembling, and their faces looked like they were in pain. Song Qing-shu knew they had suffered serious internal injuries. He immediately used his palm and lightly tapped the acupoints on each of their backs. A strong and vigorous energy penetrated into their bodies. The 4 beauties' faces immediately calmed down. Not long afterwards, beads of sweat appeared on their foreheads. One by one, they opened their eyes and called out, "Thank you, Master, for using your internal energy to treat our servants' injuries." They turned around and kowtowed to express their gratitude. Song Qing-shu quickly stretched out his hand to help them up. "You don't have to be so polite," he said. "It was I who didn't notice your strange condition." Mei Jian sighed and said, "Master, Lao wanted us to wait until we were 40 years old before we could come to this stone room to look at the drawings for 1 day a year. Turns out there was a deep meaning behind it. The martial arts in these diagrams were too profound. The maidservants overestimated their own abilities and practiced according to the diagrams. Their jinqi was insufficient, and they immediately entered the wrong meridian path. If it wasn't for Master's help, I'm afraid we 4 sisters would be paralyzed forever." Lan Jian said, Lao had high expectations for us. She hoped that when we were 40 years old, we would be able to practice this superior martial art. But the maid's aptitude was mediocre. Even if we practiced for 22 years, we might not dare to enter this stone room again. Song Qing-shu sighed and said, "So that's how it is. Then it's my fault. I shouldn't have asked you to go in." The 4 swords kowtowed again and asked for forgiveness. Master, why do you say that? That is Master's benevolence. It's all our fault for being arrogant and reckless. Zhu Jian said, Master's internal energy is profound. Practicing these profound martial arts will be very beneficial. Lao Lao often stayed in the stone room for months on end. She would study the drawings on the stone wall. Mei Jian continued. The servants of the 36 caves and 72 islands interrogated the sisters of the Great Heaven tribe. They wanted to know the location of Lao Lao's hidden treasures. The sisters would rather die than submit. The four of us originally wanted to lure them into the tunnel and activate the mechanism to kill them all in the tunnel. But we were afraid that these servants had the ability to break the mechanism. If they entered the stone room and saw the drawings on the stone wall, it would be a disaster. If we had known this, we would have let them in. Song Qingshu nodded and said, Indeed, if these drawings were seen by people with insufficient internal energy, it would be more harmful than any poison or sharp weapon. They should be glad that they didn't come in. Lan Jian smiled and said, Master is really kind. In my opinion, it would be better if they all died from practicing martial arts. Song Qingshu thought for a while and said, Although your swordsmanship is not bad, you are too young and your internal energy is not enough to learn some profound martial arts. But in the future, as my personal maids, how can your martial arts be weak? How about this? I'll teach you a divine martial art. If you practice diligently, your internal energy will naturally improve by leaps and bounds. The four girls were immediately overjoyed. They had seen how unfathomable Song Qingshu's martial arts was. The martial arts that he personally taught must be extraordinary. Song Qingshu then said, This martial art originated from India. Among the martial arts he knew, there were many divine martial arts manuals, but the one that was suitable for ordinary people to practice the fastest was the Shinzu scripture. Yutanji's martial arts were completely unorthodox, and his qualifications were very poor, but he relied on this martial art to forcibly improve his martial arts to the point where he could fight with Xiaofeng in a short time. He taught Chun Yuan, who had no foundation in martial arts, to practice this, and the effect was very obvious. Of course, the absorbing stars technique and the northern underworld divine kung fu could also make people become masters in a short time. But these two martial arts were too sinister. They needed to absorb other people's internal energy, so it was not necessarily a good thing to teach them. Soon, the girls began to perform various yoga postures according to the moves of the Shinzu scripture. Originally, these postures were very anti-human and difficult for ordinary people to do. But these maids were still young, and their bones and meridians were not completely formed, so their flexibility was many times better than ordinary people. Soon, they succeeded in learning the first few moves. Sister, why do I feel that this posture is so embarrassing? Zhu Jian glanced at Song Qingshu, who was observing the murals in the distance, and whispered to Mei Jian with a red face. Chapter 1856. Zhu Jian thought about it and nodded. You're right. Everything we have belongs to our master, so it's not a big deal. Upon the other side, Lan Jian suddenly whispered, Do you think our master will ask us to serve him tonight? Mei Jian spat. What are you thinking about in that head of yours? Zhu Jian also blushed and said, I've heard from Sister Sure that the personal maids of rich families have to warm the bed for their master. Don't think too much. Hurry up and practice. Mei Jian pinched his sister, but he couldn't help but think of some scenes. He didn't know if it was because of the posture, but his body was getting more and more numb. The whispers of the maids were quiet, but it didn't escape Song Qingshu's ears. Hearing what they were talking about, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It seemed that although Tian Shan Tong Lao was fierce, she treated them well. Otherwise, she wouldn't have such a lively personality. But he quickly calmed down and continued to look at the murals in the cave. First, he had the special ability to learn something immediately, and second, his cultivation was high. Although he looked at the murals very quickly, he quickly mastered all the martial arts. In the end, he didn't need to use the Qin Gong of the Taishan Sutra, and his whole body was floating in the air. After a few more hours, Song Qingshu had almost mastered all the martial arts in the stone room. He felt refreshed and his martial arts realm seemed to have reached another level. When he was about to leave, he suddenly heard a slight whining sound in the air. He couldn't help but stop. The sound was too soft. If he didn't have a divine cultivation, he wouldn't have been able to hear it. After a while, the whining sound came again. It felt like the legendary ghost crying at night. If it was an ordinary person, they would have been scared to the point of peeing their pants. However, Song Qing-shu, who had been educated in a complete scientific system, would not be scared by such a small thing. Soon, he understood that there must be a secret room somewhere, and the air flowed through some small cracks into the hidden cavity. That was why the sound was made. Song Qing-shu followed the sound and walked in. After walking for a few feet, he finally arrived in front of a large stone wall. He reached out his hand and touched it. He extended his inner force into it and quickly felt that there was a large space inside. After looking around, he noticed that a lampstand at the side was a little out of place. He tried twisting it a few times, and a stone door gradually opened. Song Qing-shu looked back and saw that Mei Lan, Zhu Ju, and the others were concentrating on cultivating in the distance. They did not notice the situation here. He was skilled and bold, so he wasn't afraid of any traps inside, so he walked straight in. The secret chamber was neither too big nor too small, about a few dozen square meters. However, Song Qing-shu was still shocked, because the first thing he saw was a skeleton sitting on a chair in front of him. It would have been fine if it had been an ordinary skeleton, but the skeleton looked very small, like a child. However, even though it had turned into a skeleton, the way it sat gave off an air of arrogance. How strange. Song Qing-shu was puzzled. It seemed that this skeleton was a top martial arts expert when it was alive, or someone who had been in a high position for a long time. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to give off such an air just by sitting. Could it be Pan Lang's remains? A thought flashed through Song Qing-shu's mind, but he quickly denied it. The skeleton in front of him was small and delicate, and it seemed to be young. Moreover, it was a female. It couldn't be Pan Lang. Song Qing-shu suddenly noticed that there was a scroll of parchment in the skeleton's hand. He gently took it down, and a few words appeared in front of him. The art of eternal life. Eternal life? Song Qing-shu sneered. Since ancient times, emperors, generals, and ministers all pursued the art of eternal life. What kind of person was Emperor Qin back then? He used the power of the whole country to unify the world, but it was all for naught. The later emperors learned from him, and all of them cultivated and consumed pills. In the end, not only did they not obtain eternal life, but they also died prematurely because of heavy metal poisoning. Originally, Song Qing-shu admired the person in front of him. She must have been a great person when she was alive. Unexpectedly, she was also a stupid person who pursued immortality. However, he still opened the whole parchment to see what was written on it. Very soon, his expression changed. The first few sentences mentioned the unique art of 8 desolations and 6 directions. Although this art is miraculous and has the effect of immortality, it is not true eternal life. Even with Master's omnipotent abilities, when his time is up, he has no choice but to pass away. Song Qing-shu nodded. It seemed that this person was not stupid. He continued to read and saw the words written on it. What is eternal life? I have studied the ancient books and know that the 5 decays of deities and the limit of one's physical body are the rules of the great Tao. No matter how high one's martial arts is, one cannot go against it. Although the physical body cannot live forever, what about the soul? Song Qing-shu's heart skipped a beat. He subconsciously thought of the venerated Ming. Didn't the venerated Ming develop the art of possession and successfully possess Zhang Wuji's body? In a sense, he had already obtained eternal life. At first, he was just casually looking at it. But now, he could not wait to continue reading. What is the soul? I have thought about it, and it is nothing more than memories and ways of thinking. If another person has the same memories as me, the same way of thinking as me, and thinks from the bottom of his heart that he is me, does this count as me continuing to live in this world in another way? This. Song Qing-shu could not help but be a little dumbfounded. This was the first time he had heard of such an idea. At first, he felt that it was extremely ridiculous, but gradually, he felt that it made some sense. If A had all the memories of B, the same way of thinking, and even thought that he was B, then was he A or B? He thought about it until his head was spinning. He thought that such a topic would definitely make the philosophers of the post-apocalyptic world argue endlessly. He continued to read, only to see that it said, "After exhausting all my knowledge, I have finally found a way to achieve eternal life. First, I will find a suitable candidate. She is young and does not have too many memories. If she looks similar to me, it will be even better. I will use our sex soul-searching technique to erase her original memories. Then, I will imprint my childhood memories in her mind bit by bit. I will teach her the same way of thinking and the martial arts that I know. After 100 years, she will be able to live in my place forever." Song Qingshu's expression changed several times. Suddenly, a few speculations flashed through his mind. He could not help but feel his hair stand on end. No way. Recently, I was plotted against by that B***tch Li Qiushui. If it was before, I could recover in a few months. But now, something went wrong while practicing this method of immortality. I don't have much time left. Fortunately, I found a smart girl a few days ago. Most importantly, she looks very similar to me when I was young. It seems that the plan has to be advanced. The writing at the back was a little blurred. However, reading this, Song Qingshu gradually understood the whole story. This petite skeleton in front of him was most likely the real heavenly mountain Tonglao. She had been studying a method of immortality in the Vulture Palace these years. Who knew that she would be plotted against by Li Qiushui at the critical moment? Therefore, she had to find a little girl who looked similar to her and brainwash her with the method of immortality. Finally, she passed all her martial arts to her/P. Chapter 1857. No wonder when he checked Heavenly Mountain Tonglao's meridians, he felt that she was no different from a young girl. Wu Yazi also told him that Heavenly Mountain Tonglao was a bit strange. Li Qiushui and Heavenly Mountain Tonglao often fought and gradually got used to her changes, so it was not easy for him to see the problem. Although he understood all this, Song Qingshu still had another question. Although I know that the Heavenly Mountain Tonglao is fake, her memory, way of thinking, martial arts, and even looks are the same as the real Heavenly Mountain Tonglao. Then what should I do with her identity? If she wasn't the Heavenly Mountain Tonglao, then she was no different from the Heavenly Mountain Tonglao now. Song Qingshu wondered if he should find a chance to tell her the truth, but he decided against it. It would be too shocking. Besides, her original memory had been erased by the real Heavenly Mountain Tonglao. If she knew her identity, she would probably break down. Suddenly, a series of exclamations came from behind. Song Qingshu looked back and saw Mei Lan, Zhu Zhu, and the other maids hiding at the door, looking at the skeleton in the stone chamber with fear. Song Qingshu put the parchment into his pocket and said to them, "This should be a senior who passed away in meditation in the past. Find someone to collect her remains and give her a proper burial." At this point, there was no need to reveal her true identity. Otherwise, the entire Vulture Palace would be in chaos again. Yes, Master. The maids bowed and couldn't help but look around the stone chamber curiously. I didn't know there was such a secret chamber in here. Song Qingshu rolled his eyes. You speak as if you've been here before. Zhu Jian stuck out her tongue. You're right. I wonder if Grandma has seen it before. Song Qingshu was startled. He suddenly realized that Grandma Tonglao had been cultivating here all this time. Could it be that she had never discovered this secret chamber? Ever since he came out of the secret chamber, he had been thinking about this question. He felt that Grandma Tonglao might not know the truth, but she might also know. She really was Schrodinger's cat. In the end, he did not dwell on this unsolvable problem any longer. Song Qingshu quickly turned his attention to how to deal with Li Liangzhua. The most important thing now was to consolidate the resources of Spirit Condor Palace as soon as possible, so that he could mobilize the forces under Li Liangzhua's command as soon as possible. P. He asked Granny Yu and sister-in-law Sure to organize the Spirit Vulture Palace, the 36 caves, and the 72 islands. Meanwhile, he asked Cheng Qing Shuang to investigate the current situation in the spiritual state. P. Master, it's getting late. Hurry up and rest. This servant has already prepared hot water for Master to bathe and change. A young girl walked to the desk with a porcelain cup and bowed. It was Lan Jian. P. Song Qingshu nodded. It was time to sleep. He had been running around day and night during this period of time. It was time to rest and build up his energy. Plan Jian led him to a large room. The furnishings in the room were quaint and elegant, with bronze tripod and pottery vases. In the middle of the room, there was an exquisite incense burner that smoked the best sandalwood incense. Although the whole room was simple, it had a kind of elegant temperament. In the inner room, there was a large bed. Although he didn't sit on it, he could feel the softness of the bed through the gauze curtain. Song Qingshu suddenly asked, "This used to be old Grandma Tong's room, right?" The maids were so scared that they all knelt down. "Master, please forgive us. Due to the lack of time, we didn't have the time to build a new High Lord's bedroom. In the entire Spirit Vulture Palace, old Grandma's room is the largest and best. We didn't dare to let Master live in the other narrow rooms." Mei Jian added, "But don't worry, Master. The bed sheets and bedding are all new." Song Qingshu smiled and helped them up. "I was just asking casually. Look at how scared you are. I don't mind sleeping in her bedroom, even if you don't change the bedding. It's not like I haven't slept with her before." Back in the ice cellar in the royal palace, Li Qiushui stripped Heavenly Mountain Tonglau's clothes and stuffed them into his bed. Mei Lan Ju and Ju /P/P/P/P yin is almost equal to /P. The girls' hearts were in turmoil as they looked at each other in dismay. Master and Old Tong slept together. Old Grandma Tong is so old. Master, do you think Master is also a few decades old? Is it because of his profound skills that he can maintain his youthful appearance? I don't think so. According to the rumors, Master should be around 30 years old. Don't think too much. Although old Grandma isn't young, she still looks very young, even if it's understandable. Sister, you're the one who's thinking too much. The girls were born of the same mother and understood each other's thoughts with just a look. So even if they didn't know how to use telepathy, they could still discuss the gossip in secret. Song Qingshu didn't know that their imaginations were running wild. He went to the steaming hot tub in the hall and suddenly felt his whole body itch. He said, "You guys go out first. I'm going to take a bath." Calmly then did the girls wake up from the fire of gossip, and one after another said, "Let the servants serve Master." Song Qingshu smiled. "No need. I can handle it myself." Who knew that his words would make the girls cry. "Master doesn't want us anymore. You guys are thinking too much." Song Qingshu was speechless. What are they talking about? Plan Jian cried. "We sisters are here to serve Master. We don't have any other abilities. Now that Master doesn't even let us serve him when he takes a bath, what's the point of us living in this world?" Song Qingshu smiled bitterly. "You guys used to be old Grandma Tong's maids. After all, you're all women. But now that we're different, it's really inconvenient." Heaven, the usually sensible Mei Jian, couldn't help but be confused. What's inconvenient? Isn't it normal for maids to serve masters and young masters? Song Qingshu was startled and didn't know how to refute. This world was like this. It was just that he came from the future and wasn't used to it. Jin couldn't help but cry. Does Master dislike us because we're the old Supreme Master's maids? Tomorrow, we'll have Saw and the others choose a few new maids to serve Master. That's not what I meant. Song Qingshu felt a headache coming on. All right. You guys stay here and serve." In the end, he gave up on trying to convince them. He wasn't a stubborn old pedant. He didn't need to use the customs of the future to change the people of the past. Thank you, Master. The girls' worries immediately turned to joy. The joy on their faces could be seen with the naked eye. He had to admit that although these girls were young, chatty, and unreliable, they were quite qualified to be maids. They undressed him, combed his hair. The series of actions were gentle and methodical. After all, Song Qing-shu was someone who had experienced great storms, so he quickly calmed down and enjoyed their service. But this was hard on the little girls. They had always been serving Old Lady Tong, and there were no other men in Spirit Vulture Palace. This was the first time they were so close to a man. Their chests heaved up and down, and their cheeks were steaming, making them look even more alluring. Chapter 1858. However, the girls knew the severity of the situation. Although their hearts were in turmoil, they did not dare to overstep their boundaries. They all did their best to complete their tasks. Song Qing-shu soaked in the warm water and suddenly felt relaxed. The dust from the past few days seemed to have been swept away by the warm water. "Why don't I massage Master's shoulders?" Mei Jian's gentle voice came from behind. Song Qing-shu's first reaction was to refuse. However, when he noticed her worried expression, he suddenly understood. Because of the sudden change of master, the maids of the previous High Lord were restless and did not have any sense of security in the future. He nodded slightly and did not refuse Mei Jian's good intentions. Song Qing-shu also wanted the girls to settle down and did not want them to think too much and cause trouble. Seeing that her master had agreed, Mei Jian's face flashed with a trace of redness and excitement. She carefully walked forward and was shocked when her fingers touched the other's skin. "Are all men's bodies this hot? What's wrong?" Song Qing-shu was puzzled as to why she stopped there, as if her acupuncture points had been hit. He thought that she had made a mistake in her cultivation. "No, nothing." Mei Jian's face turned red. She quickly calmed her mind and gently massaged his shoulders. Feeling the girl's slender fingers, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. The nobles of the ancient times were truly extravagant. It was no wonder that so many modern people fantasized about dressing up in ancient times and becoming a playboy. Having a pretty maid to serve him felt really good. Furthermore, he also had 4 pretty maids like her. Just like that, half an hour passed. Song Qing-shu enjoyed it so much that he did not want to get up. However, he noticed that Mei Jian's breathing was gradually becoming erratic. He knew that her arms were probably already numb after massaging for so long. He smiled at her and said, "All right, I'm almost done. Thank you." Mei Jian hurriedly said, "Serving master is a servant's duty. Master, please do not disappoint this servant." Song Qing-shu was secretly nervous. A few years ago, he had some nostalgia for the original world. However, now that this world was so beautiful, how could he want to go back? At this time, 2 young girls came in from outside the screen. They were Bamboo Sword and Chrysanthemum Sword. They smiled and said, "We sisters will help Master change his clothes." They picked up a set of light blue underwear from the tray and placed it next to the screen. Song Qing-shu was speechless. "I'll change my underwear myself." Although he enjoyed the service of the maidservants, he still couldn't get used to it. "Yes, master." The girls bowed slightly, and the corners of their lips curled up slightly. It was rare to see their master so embarrassed, and for a moment, they couldn't help but snicker. After Song Qing-shu changed his clothes and went out, he suddenly thought of something and asked, "Where's Lan Jian?" Replying to Master, "Lan Jian is warming Master's bed," the girls replied. "Warming the bed?" Song Qing-shu was dumbfounded. Although his status was now high in the Golden Snake Camp, everyone worked hard, and he naturally couldn't do anything special. When he was the emperor in disguise, the royal family didn't have the rule of warming the bed, so he had never experienced this service. He didn't expect to see it in the Vulture Palace. Unknowingly, he walked to the window, and a delicate young girl crawled out from under the covers. She was only wearing her underwear, revealing the milky white skin unique to young girls. It was Lan Jian. "Master, the bed is warmed. Master, please go to bed and rest." Lan Jian bowed down, her skin shivering in the cold air. Song Qing-shu frowned slightly. He stretched out his hand and pulled a blanket over her. "Don't catch a cold." "Thank you for your concern, master," Lan Jian said happily. "You don't have to do such things in the future. My skills are profound, and I'm already immune to heat and cold." Song Qing-shu said. He really wasn't used to this kind of lifestyle. Yes, Lan Jian's excited expression instantly dimmed. Although she didn't cry, It made people feel sorry for her. Zhu Jian couldn't help but sigh. We sisters are really useless people. Song Qingshu felt a headache. All right. You guys take turns warming the bed in the future. Is that okay? The few maids immediately turned from worry to joy. Thank you, master. Song Qingshu was startled. He gradually realized that he seemed to have fallen into the girl's trap. However, he still seemed to be looking forward to this kind of thing. Even though he knew it was a trap, he couldn't help but jump into it. Crawling under the covers, Song Qingshu smelled the fragrance of a young girl. He thought to himself, Orchid sword, orchid sword, orchid sword. You really live up to your name. I wonder if the other sisters also have the same smell. Maybe that's why Tianshan Tonglao named them that way. Song Qingshu suddenly realized something. He looked at the girls who were standing by the side. Why are you guys still standing here? Hearing his words, the girls all blushed. They exchanged looks with each other. Finally, Mei Jian mustered up the courage to say, Who does Master want to call to sleep with him tonight? Call who sleep with him? Song Qingshu felt that his brain circuit couldn't keep up with the other party. Seeing his expression, Zhu Jian thought he was struggling. She couldn't help but add in a low voice, Actually, Master can call the four of us, but I'm afraid it'll hurt Master's body. After she said this, the faces of the surrounding girls became even redder. However, no one refuted her. It was obvious that they agreed to it. Song Qingshu almost had a nosebleed. He looked at the four beautiful girls in front of him, who all looked exactly the same. When he thought about how they came from the same mother, some bold images appeared in his mind. Even though he had a strong will now, he almost lost control of his mind. What nonsense are you talking about? What kind of person do you think your master is? Song Qingshu finally managed to calm his breathing. Zhu Jian blinked her big eyes. You're our master. Isn't it only right for us to serve master and make him happy? Song Qingshu instantly felt his blood, which had calmed down with great difficulty, almost boil again. These little girls were clearly saying the most blatant and seductive words, but their expressions were so pure and flawless, as if they were talking about something that couldn't be more normal. This kind of strong contrast was really unbearable. All right. Just do your jobs well. I don't need you to sleep with me or anything. You've been guarding the Vulture Palace all this time. I'm sure you haven't had a good rest. Go to sleep. This is an order. Song Qingshu waved his hand, afraid that he wouldn't be able to stop himself from changing his mind if he hesitated. Seeing that he had put it this way, the girls could only take their leave. After leaving the room, they couldn't help but whisper among themselves. Isn't it rumored in the pugilistic world that Master has always been a playboy and has many confidants around him? That's right. Some people even say that Master can't live without a woman every day. But I think Master is obviously a gentleman. Could it be that Master is used to seeing beauties and we're too ordinary to catch his eye? Shoo, lower your voices. Master's martial arts are divine. Be careful not to let him hear you. Chapter 1859. After resting for a whole night, Song Qingshu woke up the next day feeling refreshed. He felt as if all the tiredness of the past few days had been swept away. Several maids had already prepared new clothes for him and were waiting by the window. Among them, Lan Jian was holding a porcelain bowl with a yellowish liquid in it. She handed it to Song Qingshu and said, Master, please rinse your mouth. Song Qingshu took the bowl and took a sip. It smelled like medicine with a faint bitter taste. He was in a high position and had even been an emperor, so he could naturally tell what it was. He couldn't help but say, You don't have to rinse your mouth with ginseng soup in the future. It's too wasteful. Mei Jian smiled. Master, you worry too much. Our Vulture Palace is located on Sky Mountain, and we have offerings from the people of the 36 islands and 72 caves. We may lack other things, but things like ginseng and snow lotus are everywhere in our storehouse. Moreover, you are the supreme lord of Vulture Palace. It's not a waste to let you enjoy them. Song Qingshu was stunned. He didn't expect Vulture Palace to be so rich in this aspect. He couldn't help but smile. These ginseng and snow lotus can be kept to make medicine. I will have great use for them in the future. Isn't it better than rinsing my mouth with them? The Xiaoyao sect was good at making medicine, and the 9-turn ursine pill was the top healing medicine in the Jianghu. He also knew how to make some other medicine and could make a large batch of medicine. Whether it was to treat the wounds of soldiers or to train masters, there would definitely be a large demand in the future. Yes, we will obey master's orders. The 4 sisters answered crisply. Song Qing-shu had already put on his clothes. He asked casually, "Any news from the spiritual state?" Zhu Jian answered, "Master, Sister Cheng just sent people to the spiritual state yesterday." Song Qing-shu finally reacted. "I was too impatient. Inform me as soon as there is news. Also, send someone to send a few 9-turn ursine pills to Cheng Qingshuang so that she can rest well. Leave the rest to my subordinates." "I thank Master on behalf of Sister Cheng." Mei Jian bowed. Song Qing-shu nodded slightly, but his attention was now completely focused on Mu Wanxing and Yelu Nanxian's current situation in Lingzhou City. When he left Lingzhou, Yelu Nanxian was involved in Li Yuanhao's murder case and was wanted by the imperial court. Mu Wanxing had been chosen by Li Liangzhua as the empress, and there was no telling when the wedding would be held. Now, he had gone back and forth between Song Province and the Spirit Vulture Palace. Although he had been traveling day and night, the journey was long, and it would be a month or 2 even if he hurried. "Master has finished washing up. Let's have breakfast first," Zhu Jian reported from behind him. Song Qing-shu nodded. "Have Granny Yu and Sure Saw come see me. I want to see how they're doing with the inventory." Yes, Zhu Jian went outside to pass on the order and then returned to serve Master with the other sisters. Although they were handmaidens in name, they were the personal handmaidens of the highest leader and could be said to be high-ranking handmaidens. Unless it was a particularly urgent matter, there would naturally be someone else to run errands for them. Not long after, Granny Yu, Sure Saw, and the leaders of the 9 divisions of the 9 heavens came together to report to Song Qing-shu about the casualties of the Spirit Vulture Palace, the convictions of the 36 islands and 72 grottos, and the situation of the incorporation. Song Qing-shu nodded inwardly. Heavenly Mountain Maiden had run the Spirit Vulture Palace for many years, and it was no wonder that she could stand up to Li Qiushui, who had the power of Xixia behind her. These leaders and deputy leaders were not only highly skilled in martial arts, but they were also smart and capable enough to hold their own. Suddenly, someone came in to report that the person sent by Cheng Qingshuang had returned. "Quick, let her in." Song Qing-shu felt strange. Cheng Qingshuang's person had just been sent out yesterday, and there was still a long distance from here to the spiritual state. How could she come back so soon? A sister of the Great Heaven Tribe was quickly brought in. "My lord, we happened to meet some sisters who were returning from the spiritual state on the way. They learned about the recent situation in the spiritual state, so they sent me back to report first, and the others will continue to investigate in the spiritual state." How was the situation in the spiritual state now? Song Qing-shu was overjoyed and asked hurriedly. The servant answered, "My lord, the situation in the spiritual state has changed recently. A few days ago, General Helian Taishu suddenly rebelled, imprisoned the emperor of Xixia, Li Liangzhua, and massacred a group of Li Liangzhua's direct subordinates. Now the spiritual state has changed hands, and the city gate has been closed, and people can only enter but not leave. Many other states and counties of Xixia have raised the banner of rebellion, saying that they will quell the rebellion, and the war will break out at any moment. In addition, many states and counties are watching from the sidelines, waiting for the 2 sides to determine the winner before deciding which side to support." Song Qing-shu was dumbfounded. What was going on? Recently, he had been treating Li Liangzhua as an imaginary enemy. As a result, Li Liangzhua, who was highly skilled in martial arts, had countless masters under his command, and was the emperor of Xixia, was defeated by someone else? He had some impression of Helian Taishu. He used to be a general of the Xixia military, in charge of the forces loyal to Emperor Li Yuanhao, and also supervised a part of the Class 1 Hall. However, he was firmly suppressed by the Mu brothers, and at most, he could only be regarded as the 3rd most important figure in the military. Previously, when the Mu brothers and Li Yuanhao were killed, he did not take any action. At that time, Qin Sheng thought that he had been bribed by Li Liangzhua, but now he knew that he had other plans. Li Liangzhua's martial arts were extraordinary, and he was also the emperor, but he was still taken advantage of. This could only mean that Helian Taishu had painstakingly deceived everyone. What about the Empress of Xixia? Is there any news about her? Song Qingshu thought of Mu Wanqing and asked hurriedly. The Empress? The servant showed a puzzled expression. Song Qingshu explained. It's the young lady of the Mu family, Mu Wanqing. Oh, the servant reacted. Previously, the Emperor of Xixia, Li Yuanhao, passed away, and the spiritual state was in mourning. Although Li Liangzhua made the young lady of the Mu family the Empress, there was no official wedding. Theoretically, the ceremony should only be held the following year. However, Helian Taishu caused trouble during this period, so they probably can't get married. Song Qingshu breathed a sigh of relief. It was just as he had expected. Although Li Liangzhua was the mastermind behind Li Yuanhao's death, it was impossible for him to risk universal condemnation by holding a wedding so soon after his father's death. This was also the reason why he dared to leave for such a long time. Where is young Lady Mu now? Song Qingshu continued to ask. The servant shook his head blankly. Reporting to Master, I have not heard any news about young Lady Mu. Thinking about the current situation of Mu Wanqing and Yelu Nanxian in the spiritual state, Song Qingshu could no longer restrain himself. He quickly arranged for the leaders of the various clans. I'll go down the mountain and head to the spiritual state first. You guys gather the forces of the Spirit Vulture Palace and follow me. We're going to the spiritual state to do something big. Yes, Master. Granny Yu and the others obeyed. Mei Jian said, Master, Spiritual State City is currently in danger. It's too dangerous for you to go alone. Why don't we go with you? Song Qingshu smiled. Don't you guys know my martial arts? I can come and go as I please. Who in this world can stop me? If I bring you guys along, my hands and feet will be tied. Mei Jian and the others looked ashamed. It's all because our martial arts are too weak. Not only are we unable to protect Master, but we'll also be a burden to Master. Song Qingshu comforted them. Grandma Tong has carefully taught all of you before and has given you a good foundation. Now, you just need to practice the Shinzu scripture that I taught you. It won't be long before you can help me. Chapter 1860. After Song Qingshu finished assigning tasks to the Spirit Vulture Palace, he rushed down Ethereal Peak. The Spirit Vulture Palace's base at the foot of the mountain had prepared a few camels with the longest endurance. Using the camel's leg strength, he headed east. With his previous experience, he naturally wouldn't get lost in the desert. After leaving the desert, he felt that the camels were too slow, so he used his lightness skill and sped towards Spirit State. When he was tired, he didn't stay at an inn. He just bought horses from towns along the way and rested on them. After resting, he would use his lightness skill to rush towards Spirit State. When he was tired, he would buy another horse, and so on. Fortunately, horses were produced in the Northwest. If this was the Southern Song dynasty, he wouldn't have been able to change horses so easily even if he had the money. Just like that, he sped towards Spirit State day and night. The distance between Spirit State City and Sky Mountain should have taken at least half a month, but he managed to arrive in just a few days. Outside of Spirit State City, Song Qingshu was travel-worn. He let out a breath of turbid air as he looked at the city gates in the distance. He sighed to himself. Although martial artists are powerful, they are still lacking in many aspects compared to technology. In my previous life, if I drove nonstop, it would only take a little more than a day to get from Sky Mountain to Spirit State. If I took a plane, it would be even faster, and it would only take 2 to 3 hours. But now that I'm as tired as a dog, I'm still a lot slower. Of course, aside from the fact that horses were slower than cars, the roads in this world were not as easy as the highways in his previous life, which opened up holes in mountains and built bridges over rivers. It was thanks to his unparalleled lightness skill that he was able to reach Spirit State City in just a few days. Looking at the heavily guarded city gates in the distance, Song Qingshu knew that the information he received was true. He paused for a moment and didn't rush into the city. Instead, he headed towards Jietan Temple on the outskirts of the city. I wonder if Sister Wan and Nancian are still there. Song Qing-shu was incomparably worried. If it was before, with Yellow Nancian and Mu Wanqing's martial arts, they would be able to protect themselves. But now, even Li Liangzhuo was finished. This proved that Helian Tieshu's forces were even stronger. Along the way, Song Qing-shu had been thinking about how Helian Taishu had the guts and ability to launch a coup and even succeed. After thinking about it, he concluded that Helian Taishu must have borrowed external help. Otherwise, with Li Liangzhuo's martial arts and shrewdness, how could he have been so easily taken advantage of? But Song Qing-shu did not know whose external force he had borrowed. He felt somewhat regretful. If he had known this would happen, he would not have let the Jin gang faction's master and the others go down the mountains so easily. He should have asked them if it was the Mongolians who had sent people to Western Xia. After all, the Southern Song dynasty was in a state of internal strife, and the Jin, Qing, and Liao dynasties were all under his indirect control. The Mongolians were the only ones who had the ability to overthrow the royal family of another country. Of course, it could also be that revered Ming who was stirring up trouble. Previously, he did not appear at the Vulture Palace, which made Song Qing-shu a little nervous. He did not know where he had gone. No matter who was stirring up trouble, Mu Wanqing was Li Liangzhuo's future empress, and Yellow Nancian was involved in Li Yuanhao's death. Whoever came to power would definitely target them. While he was deep in thought, the sound of fighting suddenly came from afar. Song Qing-shu flew straight to the top of a tree and looked in the direction of sound. He saw a large group of Western Xia soldiers chasing after a few people. Those people were fighting as they ran, and their bodies were already covered in blood. It looked like they would not be able to escape the pursuit of the Western Xia army. Song Qing-shu, on the other hand, was enraged. He recognized two of the people. There were two women in the crowd. They were tall and graceful, but at this moment, they looked battered and exhausted. They were Yellow Nancian and Li Qinglu. Although Li Qinglu had a top-notch movement technique like wave-like subtle steps, there were people everywhere on the battlefield. Wave-like subtle steps wouldn't be of much use. Yellow Nancian, on the other hand, was much more at ease. After all, she had been on the battlefield. Compared to Li Qinglu, who was in charge of intelligence work, she was more used to this kind of desperate fighting. Song Qing-shu did not have the time to think about why these two people were together. Now that they were in a dangerous situation, he used his movement technique and hurried over to them. Meanwhile, the Western Xia soldiers had sent out a group of cavalry to cut off their escape route. Seeing that they were surrounded, Yellow Nancian sighed and said, "I'm afraid we won't be able to leave today. It's a pity that I've dragged my sister into this. It's a pity that these former members of Class 1 Hall that I gathered with great difficulty. In order to cover our escape, they suffered many casualties." Li Qinglu wiped the blood off her face and smiled bitterly. "You don't need to thank me. I didn't really want to save you. I was just worried that if Meng Lang found out in the future, he would blame me for not saving you. That's why I pretended to come and save you. Who knew that I would underestimate the enemy's strength? And now I'm also in trouble." Previously, she had been with Song Qing-shu day and night. Naturally, she knew the relationship between them and their lover. Yellow Nancian was startled. Then, she smiled and said, "Since you told me so frankly, it shows that you have a good heart. No matter what, I owe you a favor. Later, I will try my best to cover your escape. With wave-like subtle steps, you might be able to escape." Li Qinglu gritted her teeth and said, "These are the Western Xia's most elite cavalry, the Iron Sparrowhawk. If I were to be targeted by this group of cavalry, how could I escape with my wave-like subtle steps? I just hate that thin old man's martial arts is too high. Otherwise, my plan of capturing the leader first would have succeeded. Maybe I could even use my status as a princess to take over the command of this group of cavalry." Yellow Nancian glanced at the leader of the cavalry in the distance. Next to him was a man dressed in black. He was thin and tall, like a bamboo pole. His face was full of wrinkles. He was at least 70 years old. His sunken eyes shone brightly, and he held a cold iron staff by his side. This man is called Zhu South. He is as famous as the purple-eyed demon king, Huaja Ao, in the western regions. He is a famous demon. Rumor has it that he defected to the Mongols. I didn't expect him to appear in the western Xia. Yalu Nancian couldn't help but sigh. If Brother Song was here, he would be nothing. His words also aroused Li Qinglu's interest. That's right. If Brother Song was here, killing this thin bamboo pole would be like killing an ant. Although the battlefield was very noisy, Zhu Sou's martial arts were profound. He could still hear their words clearly. He couldn't help but snort. Silly girl, you only know how to make irresponsible remarks. When he snorted, everyone on the battlefield was shocked. They couldn't help but stop fighting. Zhu Sou saw all of this and said, "Then we can capture them alive. Senior Marshal Brother will be very happy to see two beauties." The two girls' cheeks turned red. They couldn't help but scold. What a shameless old man. This Zhu Sou looked to be over 70 years old. His senior Marshal Brother could only be older. He was too old to be their grandfather. Yet, he was still thinking of such dirty things. Chapter 1861. Who do you want to kill? At this time, a cold voice came from the sky. The group of people looked in the direction of the voice and saw a young man standing on a branch of a big tree. His body moved up and down as the branches swayed, as if he was weightless. Zhu Lao's heart skipped a beat. This young man's lightness kung fu is very high. Who are you? Zhu Lao shouted. The young man coldly replied, "Didn't you say you wanted to kill me with one hand?" Big Brother Song. Dream Boy. Pat this time, Yalu Nancian and Li Qinglu also recognized the identity of their sweetheart. Their voices were filled with surprise and disbelief. Song Qingshu lightly jumped down from the tree and landed next to the two women. He said apologetically, "I'm sorry I came late and made you suffer." The two women suddenly had a glimmer of hope, and it was their sweetheart who came to their rescue. They immediately cried tears of joy. If it weren't for the fact that this was not the right time, they would have thrown themselves into his arms and told him everything. Wait for me. Let me take care of this thin bamboo pole first." Song Qingshu smiled at the two women and disappeared from the place. Hearing his words, Zhu Lao's heart skipped a beat, and he raised his guard. He didn't think that the other would suddenly disappear from his sight. He was scared out his wits. However, he had a reputation for being fierce for dozens of years. He didn't live up to his reputation. He instinctively stabbed towards a direction behind him. Song Qingshu had just used so close, yet worlds apart, and instantly appeared next to him. He saw the cold iron staff coming at him, but this sudden attack didn't pose any threat to him. A few days ago, he had mastered the martial arts of the Xiaoyao sect, so his empty-handed blade catching technique had reached the peak. Before Zhu Lao could react, he felt his veins go numb. He could no longer hold the cold iron staff that had accompanied him for decades and had never left his hand. It fell to the ground. Tried to fight back, but the opponent's strength hit him, and he felt like he was struck by lightning. He had suffered serious internal injuries. How could he use his internal energy? Song Qingshu grabbed him by the throat, his eyes filled with admiration. "Although you are as thin as a bamboo pole, your internal energy is not bad." Even though the other party had been captured by him, with his current level of cultivation, the number of people in the entire Jianghu who could dodge his sneak attack could be counted on one hand. On the other hand, the other party had managed to counterattack in a hurry, which was enough to make people look at him in a different light. Who are you? Why is your martial arts so high? Zhu Sou's voice was full of fear, and he was no longer as arrogant as before. Suddenly, he seemed to think of something and said, "There are only so many people in Jianghu who can't even withstand one strike from me, and your surname is Song. Are you the prince consort of Riyang's mansion?" Song Qingshu was stunned for a moment before he realized that the man was referring to his relationship with Zhao Min. He could not help but be in a good mood. Has the Mongolians already publicly acknowledged my relationship with Zhao Min? Based on the man's tone, it was obvious that he was from Mongolia. I advise you to let me go. Zhu Sou gradually calmed down from the shock of being captured. let's not talk about your relationship with Ruyang's mansion, and just talk about your martial arts. You only took advantage of me because of your strange lightness skill. Later, when you meet my senior brother, whose lightness skill is not inferior to yours, you won't be able to do anything. P. Who is your senior brother? Song Qing-shu did not take it seriously. Although Zhu Sou's martial arts were very strong, he was still inferior to Qiu Qianren, and he could not even sense the ingenuity of Song Qing-shu's method of capturing him. However, Song Qing-shu did not mind taking this opportunity to find out some useful information. P. My senior brother is the head of the flowery sect, Nian Liandan, who is known as the Flower Fairy. He is one of the 3 great grandmasters of the extraterritorial area. These years, he has followed the Great Khan on expeditions and killed many grandmasters of the countries. Zhu Sou's tone was full of pride. It was obvious that he admired this senior brother to the bone. P. The flowery sect? Song Qing-shu was a little confused. How come the characters in Huang Yi's novels were so strange? However, he remembered that several of Huang Yi's novels had described many masters under the command of the Mongolian Great Khan. Song Qing-shu did not know whether Huang Yi had made them up or if the legends of these people had always existed and he had collected and organized them. P. Are you afraid? Seeing that he was stunned, Zhu Sou said, "You'd better let me go. At that time, for the sake of the Ruyang mansion, my senior brother may let you go. To be safe, you can take those 2 women as gifts. My senior brother loves beautiful women the most. Once he sees them, he may spare your life. P. You talk too much." Song Qing-shu tightened his grip and directly crushed Zhu Sou's throat. Zhu Sou's old eyes widened as if he did not expect that after so many years in the extraterritorial area, he would die in such a silent way. P. He killed Zhu Sao. Someone shoot him to death. When Zhu Sou was captured, the leader of this team of Iron Sparrowhawks was afraid to shoot at the rat for fear of harming Zhu Sao. Now that Zhu Sou was dead, he was shocked and angry, so he ordered his men to shoot. P. The Iron Sparrowhawks were the Western Xia's most elite troops. Their bows and arrows were already ready. Once the order was given, a rain of arrows flew towards Song Qing-shu. P. Watch out! Yelu Nanxian and Li Qinglu both cried out in alarm. P. Song Qing-shu's hands moved slightly in front of him. A cyclone visible to the naked eye appeared. As soon as the arrows came into contact with the cyclone, they lost their aim and began to spin in the direction of the cyclone. P. Seeing that it was about time, Song Qing-shu directed the cyclone in his hand back. The arrows mixed in the cyclone were reflected back at him at a speed several times faster than before. The group of knights who shot the arrows fell to the ground and died. P. Song Qing-shu's figure flashed, and he was already next to the commander. The commander wanted to pull out his saber to fight back, but before he could do so, he was already under Song Qing-shu's control. P. Grabbing the commander, Miao, he brought him to Li Qinglu's side and shouted to the rest of the soldiers, "Your general has been captured. Now that Princess Inchuan is here, put down your weapons and surrender. We will let bygones be bygones." P. The group of soldiers looked at each other in dismay. Miao, he was like a god, advancing and retreating, killing the expert Zhu Lao, capturing their leader, and killing a large number of archers. Now that he had the title of princess, how could they still hesitate? They used this opportunity to beg for forgiveness from Li Qinglu. Li Qinglu sent her subordinates to control these knights. Only then did Song Qing-shu ask, "Where's Wan Qing? Why don't I see her?" Yelu Nanxian hurriedly replied. A group of soldiers suddenly broke into Jitan Temple. They had the advantage in numbers and many experts. We were outnumbered. Little Sister Mu was captured by them. If Princess did not come to help, I'm afraid I would not have been able to escape. Song Qing-shu suddenly looked at the group of surrendered soldiers, asking, "Where did you take Miss Mu?" The group of soldiers hurriedly replied, "The great general personally ordered that Miss Mu is the future empress and cannot be left outside. So, he sent someone to invite her back to the palace." Palace? Song Qing-shu remembered what Zhu Lao had said and hurriedly asked, "That flower fairy Nian Liandan, where is she now?" The great general arranged for her to stay in the palace to intimidate all the clans in the capital. Abaihu replied. Song Qingshu's heart sank. He hurriedly said to Yelu Nanxian and Li Qinglu, I have to enter the palace immediately, otherwise little sister one will be in danger. Chapter 1862. Song Qingshu knew very well what kind of people in the flowery sect were. To put it nicely, they were romantic and elegant, but to put it bluntly, they were like rapists. Hoshibai was the only one who followed the rules. The rest of the people in the flowery sect were the most shameless people in the martial arts world. He didn't know if there was a Hoshibai in the history of the flower room in this world, but the appearance of Nian Liandan and the others meant that most of the other grandmasters written by Master Huang were here as well. In fact, this made sense. The golden books were often written from the perspective of the Southern Song dynasty, so most of the grandmasters who appeared were from the Southern Song dynasty. However, this created a paradox. If the Southern Song dynasty had so many peerless martial arts masters, why didn't they send them to assassinate Temujin? However, the Mongolians were able to conquer most of Eurasia and had many talented subordinates. They couldn't have fewer masters than the Southern Song. According to the golden books, both the Ruyang Mansion and Kublai had a lot of masters under their command. As a Mongolian Khan, he should have more masters under his command. Indeed, Eagle Shooter Temujin didn't have many masters under his command, but at that time, the Mongolians were still in the startup phase. Now that they had conquered countless countries, who knew how many masters they had under their command? The Shaolin Temple in the Central Plains had many masters, and all the sects in the world had sent their congratulations to the Mongolians. The Pope of Europe, the sects in the Middle East, the Tibetan Tantra, the Zen of the Central Plains, and the Chuanjin sect all showed how many masters he had under his command. Would there be a lot of masters who could break through the void? Thinking about the inhuman settings written by Master Huang, Song Qingshu couldn't help but feel a headache. At the same time, he admired Honored Ming for being able to rely on those second-rate masters from the Ming dynasty to stall the Mongolians for so many years. He was truly a genius among geniuses. It was a wise decision to let him live. We'll go with you, Yelu Nanxian and Li Qinglu said hurriedly. Song Qingshu's first reaction was to refuse. It was much more convenient for him to move alone. However, on second thought, he had just arrived at the spiritual state and didn't know what was going on here. If he just rushed into the palace like this, it would be easy for him to make the wrong judgment. So, he nodded and said, Okay, you guys come with me. Qinglu, settle your subordinates in the city first. We'll summon them when we need them. Okay. Li Qinglu nodded. The people from Class 1 Hall were originally intelligence agents, and hiding their identities was something that was common to them. After quickly making arrangements for his subordinates, Song Qingshu led the two ladies to the imperial palace of Lingzhou City. Along the way, he asked the two ladies about what had happened recently, and they answered one question after another, and he finally got the gist of it. At first, everything was under Li Liangzuo's control. He focused on hunting down the remnants of the old concubine and purging the crown prince's former subordinates to consolidate his own power, causing some people in Lingzhou City to panic. However, a few days ago, news came from the royal palace that Qin had plotted against the new emperor. The new emperor was severely wounded, and the royal palace was sealed. Officials from outside the royal palace could not enter the royal palace to see the new emperor. Then, the entire Lingzhou was sealed, and people could only enter but not leave. Only then did everyone know that something had happened. Because during this period of time, Helian Taishu had been the one in charge, wantonly encircling and suppressing the Qin clan's people. Everyone guessed that he was the one who had initiated the coup and imprisoned the new emperor. Didn't they say that Li Longzhuo was killed? Song Qingshu asked curiously. Yelu Nanxian shook her head. Right now, there is no evidence to prove that he is dead. It's just that many people are guessing that he has been killed. Song Qingshu then asked, What is the attitude of the various forces in Lingzhou City now? Although Helian Taishu was the great general, he could not control all the forces in Lingzhou City. Yelu Nanxian explained, the Qin clan was originally Li Longzhuo's loyal subjects, but they were accused of treason. In fact, many people were suspicious. However, the Qin clan used to be in-laws with the Mu clan, so they also had the motive to rebel. So, everyone just sat and watched the situation unfold. The Qin clan was either dead or captured. In the future, the Qin clan's name will most likely be removed from Xixia. Song Qingshu hurriedly asked, "What about Qin Hongyan, little sister Wan's mother?" Qin Hui had committed too many sins in the past. Now that his clan was gone, he could only blame himself. However, he had a friendship with Qin Hongyan, so he naturally did not want to see her perish. Yalu Nancian answered, "Auntie Qin has been living in the Jiatan Temple. She was not with the Qin clan, so she managed to escape. However, just now, she was captured by Helian Tieshu's subordinates along with Wan Qing." Li Qinglu quietly poked Song Qingshu's waist and whispered, "Meng Lang, if you're interested in the princess of Tiandu, when the situation here is settled, I will secretly send someone to bring her here. After all, she is just the wife of Sinner, so it's not a big deal. Just remember not to let Miss Mu know. I think she would be too embarrassed to say anything after this, let alone tell her daughter." She was taught by Li Qiushui, so naturally, she had inherited Li Qiushui's evil aura. On top of that, the Xixia side's words were also a bit presumptuous, which made Wuji afraid. Song Qingshu hurriedly scolded, "What nonsense are you talking about? I just don't want little sister Wan to be sad. That's why I'm concerned about her mother's safety." Li Qinglu curled her lips. "Hypocrite, your words don't match your heart." "What hypocrite?" On the other side, Yalu Nancian couldn't help but ask. Song Qingshu blushed. "Nothing. All right, what about Li Liangzua's direct subordinates? Did they not react to this?" Yalu Nancian answered, "When the Qin clan was purged, Gao Huaichong and Mao Weizheng were immediately captured. By the time the others reacted, it was already too late. Right now, Li Liangzua's subordinates are waiting to see how the situation turns out. If the situation is really settled in the end, I think they can only rely on Heli and Tai Shu. After all, everyone has their own families, and no one wants to work for a master who is already dead." Li Qinglu continued, "A portion of the first-class hall has already listened to Helian Tieshu's command. With great difficulty, I managed to gather a portion of the old concubine's trusted aides, but most of them are still watching." Song Qingshu nodded. "This is indeed human nature. They are still watching because your grandmother's influence was too great in the past. They are worried that she will make a comeback. If they know that your grandmother is no longer a threat, I'm afraid they will immediately pledge allegiance to Helian Tai Shu. There are also those from the Mu clan. Back then, the Mu brothers controlled half of the Western Xia's military power. They still have a lot of trusted aides under their command. This time, Helian Tai Shu is in such a hurry to capture Miss Mu. I'm sure he wants to use her identity to make those people from the Mu clan surrender." Li Qinglu said. Listening to the two women's explanation of the situation in Lingzhou City, Song Qingshu slowly formed a plan in his mind. However, all of this was built upon entering the palace and rescuing Mu Wanqing first. We need to hurry up. Jidan Temple was located in the outskirts of Lingzhou City. There was still some distance from the palace. Song Qingshu held the two women's hands and sped up towards the temple. At this time, in the palace, a man dressed in luxurious clothing stood in the emperor's bedroom. He had a high nose and deep eyes. He was definitely not someone from the Central Plains. However, his long robe fluttered in the wind, and he wore a scholarly crown on his head. His bearing was extraordinary, and his face was quite handsome. However, his eyes flickered, showing that he was a crafty and fickle person. Chapter 1863. The man lying on the bed was Li Liangzua, the newly crowned emperor of the Western Xia country. Anyone who was familiar with him would be shocked to see his current appearance. He looked haggard and his eyes were dim. He didn't have any of his previous high-spirited appearance. Bastard! Li Liangzua, who was lying on the bed like a living dead, suddenly became excited when he heard the man's words. The well-dressed man said with a smile, "I know you are not convinced that you lost to me. You always think that it was because of my sneak attack. Li Liangzui stared at him with hatred. Isn't it? The well-dressed man didn't care. He smiled and said, Your martial arts are good, but you are no match for me even if we fight face to face. I just don't want to have a head-on duel with you to avoid trouble. Li Liangzui snorted. Since it has come to this, you can say whatever you want. The winner is king, and the loser is in the wrong. This is the truth of the world, the well-dressed man said calmly. But I am in a good mood these days. I can make you accept your defeat. I won't accept my defeat, even if I die. Li Liangzui clenched his teeth so hard that they almost bled. Really? The well-dressed man showed a strange smile. A man's biggest failure is to not only be defeated, but also to have his own woman surrender to his enemy. I will let you thoroughly taste the taste of failure. Li Liangzui felt a rush of hot air rushing to the top of his head, followed by a chill down his spine. Now that your martial arts are strong, Miss Moon naturally can't resist you, but I know her character very well. She will never submit to you. Really? Don't be too sure. The well-dressed man showed a playful expression, like a cat playing with a mouse. I heard that you used the power of the emperor to make her the empress. But Miss Moon doesn't seem to have any feelings for you, so she refused you several times when you went to see her. Father has just passed away, and her family has just suffered a disaster. She should observe mourning for 3 years. It is normal for her to refuse me. Li Liangzui snorted. The well-dressed man laughed. You don't understand a woman's heart. Obviously, you are not charming enough. Do you believe that I can make her take off her clothes in front of me and offer herself to sleep with me? Dream on. Li Liangzui knew that Mu Wanqing had always been staunch, so how could she do such a thing? How about we make a bet? If you win, I will spare your life and allow you to spend the rest of your life happily with the queen. If I win, you will tell me the secret words that you made with your trusted subordinates, and I will still spare your life. How's that sound? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Li Liangzui sneered again and again. He knew that the reason why he could still live until now was mainly because he was cautious in the beginning. He had made an agreement with his trusted subordinates. In addition to the imperial seal and personal seal, he had also set up a unique password system, which was different from everyone's password. This was actually a secret measure that he had taken to avoid information being leaked when he was hiding his strength and biding his time in the past few years. Later, when he seized the throne, he kept this habit, which indirectly saved his life. Otherwise, he would have died the moment he lost the battle during the coup a few days ago. The well-dressed man did not care. You will agree to my bet because you have no other capital to turn the tables now. Even if you know that this hope is very slim, you will still grasp it. Li Liangzui's expression changed. He knew that what the man said was not false. Now that his dantian had been destroyed, he had become a cripple. He could not even move normally like an ordinary person due to his serious injuries. If he continued to sleep here like this, only death awaited him. Instead of that, he might as well take a gamble. Okay, I'll bet with you, but you can't use force to force her, and you can't use her family to threaten her. You can only rely on your own charm. Li Liangzui said the last few words through gritted teeth. He resisted the nausea in his heart. The man in front of him was like a demon in his eyes. Where's the slightest bit of charm to speak of? As for this bet, he had sealed off all possibilities of the man using underhanded tricks. This way, with Mu Wanqing's fiery temper, she would never throw herself into that man's arms. No problem. The well-dressed man snapped his fingers and ordered his subordinates outside the door. Bring the empress you just invited here. Seeing that he agreed so readily, Li Liangzui's heart sank. He knew very well that the man was not a fool. Otherwise, he would not have been able to change the world with one strike. The man easily proved that he had a card up his sleeve, but no matter how hard he thought, he really could not think of a reason why Mu Wanqing would yield. Not long after, Mu Wanqing was brought over. When the well-dressed man saw her, he could not help but exclaim in admiration, lively and fragrant, extremely charming, like the radiance of the crescent moon and the snow piled up by the flowering trees. You are indeed a one-in-a-million beauty. No wonder Li Liangzui can't forget you. Mu Wanqing's delicate brows furrowed slightly. Who are you? The well-dressed man waved his hand, indicating for the guards who were escorting her to leave first. Only then did he say, "I am the leader of the Flowers sect. My name is Nian Liandan, and my nickname is Flower Fairy." Mu Wanqing revealed a hint of disgust. "This nickname sounds like you're not a good person. You're like a rapist." Nian Liandan relied on his handsome appearance and confident demeanor to always be successful when it came to women. He had never been rebuked so badly like today. Lilianzua could not help but laugh loudly. The depression that had accumulated over the past few days could not help but be swept away. "Haha, this is your so-called charm. I'm dying of laughter, cough cough." Only now did Mu Wanqing notice Lilianzua lying on the bed. She could not help but ask, "So you're here? Huh, what happened to you?" Lilianzua wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and a hint of relief appeared on his face. "I thought you were heartless to me, but I didn't think you would still care about me. I was plotted against by this guy, which is why I'm like a living dead now." Mu Wanqing went over to investigate and discovered that he had already become a cripple. She could not help but say, "If you can't beat him with your martial arts, then it's even more impossible for me. I can't help you. I don't need you to help me. It's just that this person made a bet with me just now. He said that he could make you willingly throw yourself into his arms." Lilianzua was worried that there would be some unforeseen event, so he mentioned the bet in advance to give Mu Wanqing a warning, just in case. Mu Wanqing could not help but be furious. Shameless. She raised her arm, and the poison sleeve dart shot toward Nian Liandan. Nian Liandan's figure did not move at all. His two jade-like fingers lightly caught the poison sleeve dart. What a fierce rouge horse. Riding like this makes me feel even more subdued. Lilianzua was greatly shocked and hurriedly said, "You said you wouldn't use force to force her." Chapter 1864. Mu Wanqing was stunned at first. Then her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Are you out of your mind? Is that so?" Nian Liandan's expression was indescribable, and her tone became even softer. "But I'm the person you love the most in this life." Mu Wanqing wanted to scold him for being shameless, but when she met his eyes, she felt as if his eyes were shining with an enchanting light. His gaze went from light to dark, and from dark to light, as if there was a suction force. She could not help but be confused, and she unconsciously began to repeat after him, "The person I love the most." Lilianzua had just reminded Mu Wanqing, and when he saw her reaction, he finally relaxed. But this strange scene made his heart instantly jump again. "Wanqing, Wanqing, what's wrong?" Unfortunately, Mu Wanqing turned a deaf ear to his words and continued to silently recite his words. Her eyes, which were originally as lively as water, also gradually became dull. "Come over here." Nian Liandan's voice became even softer, and she beckoned him over. "Yes." Mu Wanqing's eyes seemed to show a hint of struggle, but in the end, she still walked towards him step by step. What sorcery is this? Lilianzua's entire body was cold. He finally understood why she had so much confidence in making a bet with him. He was a top expert in the martial arts world, and his knowledge was naturally extraordinary. When he saw the scene in front of him, he instantly remembered some of the legends in the martial arts world, such as the 90 Manual's Great Soul Transfer Technique and the Carefree Sect's Great Voice Transmission and Soul Searching Technique. This was clearly something similar. Nian Liandan smiled slightly. "This is the ultimate technique of our flower room, the Flower Soul Immortal Technique. It can make all the women in the world listen to you." Once she finished speaking, as if to demonstrate, she ordered Mu Wanqing, who was standing at the side in a daze, "Undo your dress." Yes. Mu Wanqing was no longer as dull as before. Instead, she pursed her lips and smiled shyly. As she blushed, she began to undo the ribbon around her waist, as if she was shy in front of her lover. Lilianzua's eyes were wide open. He had never seen Mu Wanqing reveal such a coy attitude in front of him. In the past, Mu Wanqing had always been cold. She would greet him with poison-sleeve darts at the slightest provocation, like a cold iceberg. At this moment, her cheeks were like fire, and she was indescribably tender and lovely. Her skin, which was usually as white as snow, was now covered with a layer of rouge. Her eyes were watery and full of tenderness. Anyone who was looked at by her couldn't help but feel their heart and soul sway. Separated by a great distance, he could even smell the faint fragrance coming from her body. If he saw Mu Wanqing in this state in the past, he would definitely be overjoyed, but now his entire body was ice cold because he knew that his sweetheart's mind had been bewitched, and at this moment she had already treated that demon as her most beloved lover. After Mu Wanqing untied the ribbon around her waist, Nian Liandan walked over and used her fingers to lift up the outermost part of her dress. At the same time, she looked towards Li Longzhua. Now, are you willing to admit defeat? After Mu Wanqing untied the ribbon around her waist, Nian Liandan walked over and used her fingers to lift up her outermost dress. She looked at Li Longzhua. Now, are you willing to admit defeat? Nian Liandan laughed. As a member of Demon's Sect, when did I call myself a grandmaster? Also, I didn't violate the agreement. First, I didn't use force. Second, I didn't use her family to threaten her. Look at her current appearance. Is she willing? Being enchanted by your witchcraft counts as willing? Li Liangzhua gnashed his teeth in hatred. First, the woman he loved was now in a wolf's kiss. Second, the bet had failed. His last hope was gone. You can have her tell you herself if she is willing. Nian Liandan smiled and said to Mu Wanqing, Are you willing? Of course I'm willing. Mu Wanqing lowered her head and said with a red face, as if she was a shy little woman, Now you give up? Nian Liandan looked at Li Liangzhua. If you admit defeat now and tell me the secret message, I can let her go and help the two of you. But if you don't say it, Nian Liandan tossed the veil in her hand onto the ground. She's only taking off her outermost clothes now. If she continues to take it off, I'll see everything about her alluring body. Don't tell me you want to be cuckolded? Shameless. Li Liangzhua bit his lips so hard that they were about to bleed. Unfortunately, his cultivation was crippled and there was nothing he could do. As for the other's condition of telling him the secret message, he didn't believe it at all. He knew that if he said it, what awaited him was death. Looks like you still won't say it. Nian Liandan sighed. Then there's nothing I can do. Even though I'm lustful, I still prioritize business. Who knew that you wouldn't appreciate it? I've seen all the beauties in the world, but I've never played with an empress, and such a beautiful empress at that. The other's words were like a sharp sword, stabbing into the bottom of Li Liangzhua's heart. When he thought about how the outstanding beauty Mu Wanqing had been tainted by his great enemy before he had even touched her, he couldn't help but feel grief and indignation. Wait, what changed your mind? Nian Liandan looked at him with a smile. Li Liangzhua's expression changed. He was clearly considering the various possibilities. But no matter how he thought about it, what awaited him was still death. Nian Liandan waited for a long time. Seeing that he didn't speak, she finally lost her patience. She ordered Mu Wanqing, Lie down on the couch over there and wait for me. Mu Wanqing's face reddened. She softly made a sound of agreement and obediently walked to the couch on the other side to lie down. It was unknown if it was out of shyness or something else, but she also pulled the blanket over her body. Even so, the thin silk blanket was completely unable to conceal her exquisite curves. It was a picture of a sleeping begonia that was enough to make any man's blood boil. Nian Liandan couldn't help but sigh. Originally, I just wanted to use this opportunity to play with you. But this woman is really too beautiful. It's enough to stimulate my somewhat withered heart. Right now, I only feel the blood in my entire body boiling, as if I've returned to my youth. This kind of feeling is really too beautiful. Walking step by step towards the beauty on the couch, Nian Liandan purposefully stopped midway. Seeing that even though Li Liangzhua's breathing was heavy and his eyes red, he was still unwilling to reveal the secret, she couldn't help but sigh. Looks like you don't love this woman as much as you say to others. Fine, no matter if you love her or not, she's your empress. I want you to watch as I wantonly play with your peerlessly beautiful empress. At that time, in front of me, you'll be a complete failure. Wait, Li Liangzhua finally spoke. Oh, you've thought it through? Nian Liandan looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. Li Liangzhua asked in a low voice, since you know this flower soul celestial art, why don't you directly use it on me? You'll naturally be able to obtain my secret. Why is there a need to use this kind of dirty trick to threaten me? Nian Liandan sighed. Do you think I don't want to? Unfortunately, since the founding of our flower room sect, we've always pursued the beautiful women of the world. In our eyes, men are as disgusting as mud. These arts we've researched are naturally targeted at the beautiful women of the world. Who would be so disgusting as to want to bewitch a stinky man? So, the flower soul celestial art is only effective on women. It's useless on men. Chapter 1865. Are you willing to say the password now? My previous promise is still valid. Nian Liandan asked. Li Liangzhua opened his mouth, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Nian Liandan sneered. Looks like you won't give up until you reach the Yellow River. Since that's the case, I'll do it right now. I'm sure it will be the greatest joy in the world. Walking to the side of the bed, Nian Liandan turned around and looked at Li Liangzhua with an evil charm. Oh right, I'll remind you one last time. If you want to go back on your word, you'd better do it quickly. Otherwise, if I'm halfway through and you suddenly shout for me to stop, I might not be able to control myself. I'll definitely have to do everything I can before we talk. At that time, even if I fulfill the two of you, what you'll get will be a broken flower, ha ha. His wanton laughter resounded throughout the entire bedchamber. Although Li Liangzhua felt pain in his heart, he had no way to stop what was about to happen. He knew that as long as he said the password, only death would await him. Now that he was guarding the secret of the password, he would still have the capital to negotiate in the future. It could be considered his slim chance of survival. However, this person was really too hateful. He actually thought of such a sinister method to force himself. Wanqing, I'm sorry. In the future, I'll definitely find a chance to take revenge for you. TSK. As expected, you're exceptionally beautiful. Nian Liandan looked down at the beauty on the bed. Her face was smooth and translucent. Her small cherry mouth was nimble, and her red lips and snow-white skin reflected off each other. At this moment, she was actually so breathtaking. As the sect master of the flower room, Nian Liandan had seen who knew how many peerless beauties in the world. Although he looked young on the outside, in reality, due to his profound cultivation, he was already in his 70s or 80s. Logically speaking, his heart was already as calm as an ancient well, but when he saw the beauty in front of him, he suddenly discovered that his heart was moved. This kind of feeling was like when he first saw his sweetheart when he was young. This kind of feeling made him very uncomfortable. Suddenly, a trace of rage rose from the bottom of his heart. He did not want to be captured by the woman in front of him. He wanted to become this woman's master. He wanted to completely possess her and conquer her. His breathing became a bit heavier. Nian Liandan could no longer endure it. He stretched out his hand to touch the young girl's tender and white face. Just as it was about to touch, Nian Liandan suddenly shouted loudly. Her figure flashed, and she directly dodged 3 meters away. She raised her bleeding palm and looked at it. Then, she looked at the entrance of the hall with a fearful expression. Who exactly are you? A handsome young man appeared at the door, and beside him were 2 peerlessly beautiful women. One was tall and elegant, the other was charming and graceful. In that instant, it caused Nian Liandan to temporarily forget the pain in her hand. She thought to herself, what kind of bullshit luck did I have today? I actually encountered 3 such beautiful and refined women in a row. The handsome man did not reply. He took light steps, and it was not clear how he was running. In the next moment, he had already appeared beside the couch. He looked at Mu Wanqing, who was lying on the couch, and said in a deep voice, Little Sister Wan, I've made you worried. These 3 people were naturally Song Qing Shu, Yalu Nanxian, and Li Qinglu. Li Qinglu was very familiar with the Imperial Palace, easily finding their way here. As for the guards outside, they didn't even have time to react before they fell to the ground. Mu Wanqing looked at the man in front of her in confusion. She felt that he was a little familiar, but she couldn't remember who he was. She couldn't help but ask, Who are you? Song Qingshu frowned and reached out to check her pulse. He found that her pulse was stable and there were no signs of injury. At this time, Liangzhua said she was hit by Nian Liandan's flower soul celestial technique, and her mind was bewitched. Song Qingshu suddenly understood and secretly blamed himself for not thinking of it earlier. He hurriedly helped Mu Wanqing up. Little sister Wan, look at me. HM? Mu Wanqing stared at him in confusion. She felt that his eyes suddenly became as black as ink, and there was a faint light in the middle, like the starry sky. In the next moment, Mu Wanqing's eyes regained their clarity, and she looked at Song Qingshu and said with surprise and joy, Big brother Song, why are you here? Song Qingshu smiled slightly. I'm back. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Nian Liandan asked in bewilderment. Who are you to be able to undo my flower soul celestial technique? Only now did Song Qingshu have the time to turn around and look at him. What kind of bullshit celestial technique is this? It's just using stronger mental energy to plant a mental imprint on someone else. Just erase it. How could it be so simple? If I'm not skilled in this, no matter how strong my mental energy is, I won't be able to do it. Nian Liandan snorted. The way you performed the technique just now, could it be the legendary soul-shifting technique from the 9 manual? Song Qingshu was too lazy to answer him, and directly asked, You're the Nian Liandan of the 3 great outer realm craftsmen that old Zhu spoke of? Nian Liandan stood with his head held high, and said with a proud expression, That's me. He suddenly thought of something, and asked, Where's old Zhu? Song Qingshu said indifferently, I killed him. Nian Liandan's pupils contracted. Old Zhu was my only junior brother. We've been like brothers for several decades. You actually dared to kill him. Good, very good. There's no need for you to be so angry. Since you two have such deep feelings for each other, I'll quickly reunite you two. Song Qingshu helped Mu Wanqing down from the couch. Seeing that her clothes were still relatively intact, he couldn't help but sigh in relief. Fortunately, he had arrived in time. Nian Liandan sneered. Young man, don't be so arrogant. Do you know who I am? Although he said this, he was extremely fearful in his heart. The wound on his hand was proof of how sharp the other's sword energy was. Moreover, he had just seen the other move from the entrance of the hall to the side of the couch in 2 or 3 steps. Even he could not see through the other's movement technique. This was also why he had not acted rashly all this time. Otherwise, with his temper, if he encountered someone who disturbed his mood, he would have long since cut the person into pieces. Isn't it just an evil old pervert? Song Qingshu said disdainfully and took a step forward. Then do you know who I am? Feeling the pressure of Mount Tai pressing down on her, Nian Liandan retreated 3 steps before regaining her footing. Her expression changed greatly as she suddenly had an idea. Such a powerful young man, using sword energy and knowing the 9 manual. Could it be that you are the Golden Snake King, Song Qingshu? A look of surprise flashed across Song Qingshu's face. You actually know me? Nian Liandan calmed her somewhat agitated Jinshi and said coldly, Jin Luan Fuwang, Jin Gang Master, and the others have praised you to the heavens, but in my opinion, you're only sis. Song Qingshu was silent for a moment, then asked, comparing you to them, whose martial arts are better? Nian Liandan said proudly, they're only fit to serve the princes, but I am an expert by the Khan's side. It's obvious who is better. Song Qingshu sighed. Temujin has been conquering the world these past few years, and he has indeed gathered quite a few experts. Brat, now you're afraid, aren't you? I don't know how many people like me are around a great Khan, and some of them are even more powerful than me. This time, I've come to the Western Xia under the order of the Great Khan. Considering your relationship with the Ruyang Mansion, I can let you go. Nian Liandan actually did not want to talk so much nonsense. The main thing was that he could not see through this young man in front of him, and he really did not want to have a conflict with him under these circumstances. Therefore, he planned to use the name of Mongolia to scare him. If they could bury the hatchet, that would be the best. Even if they could not, He could use words to make him feel apprehensive, and it would be inevitable that he would hesitate when he attacked later. Chapter 1866. Nian Liandan said angrily, "What a shameless boast! If the Khan really is here, only death awaits you." Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Temujin is also a top-notch master? According to the records in the Condor Shooting Manual, when he was young, he followed Temujin to conquer the world. At that time, Temujin didn't seem to know any high-level kung fu, so even if he did learn it later, his progress should have been limited. But from the meaning of his words and the fear in his eyes, it was obvious that Temujin's kung fu was very high. But how was that possible? The path of kung fu couldn't be learned in a day. Song Qingshu suddenly realized that he himself could be considered a master in a short period of time. If Temujin obtained something similar to the Dark North Divine Kung Fu, he should also be able to become a top-notch master in a short period of time. Now that the Mongolian Empire ruled the world and controlled tens of thousands of miles of land, it shouldn't be difficult to find something similar. Nian Liandan snorted. The Great Khan is unfathomable. How can we speculate? However, you have been disrespectful to the Great Khan. If these words reach the Great Khan's ears, even the Ruyang Wangfu will not be able to protect you. Song Qingshu collected his thoughts and said calmly, "I don't need the protection of the Ruyang Palace. On the other hand, even if you use Temujin's name, you won't be able to save your own life." Nian Liandan was so angry that he laughed. "Haha, do you really think you can beat me? You're right. In terms of internal energy, you're better than me, but the path of Kung Fu isn't just about internal energy. Whether it's fighting experience or Kung Fu techniques, I have decades more than you." Just now, when his opponent took a step forward, he had no choice but to take a few steps back. Although it was partly due to the element of surprise, the power that his opponent displayed in that instant was clearly stronger than his own. But he wasn't that afraid. He had seen too many top-notch masters by the Khan's side over the years and had experienced countless battles of life and death. Not to mention, he had a trump card, so he was confident that he could kill this person. Song Qingshu looked at him calmly. "Are you saying all this to cheer yourself up? What? Are you already scared before the battle?" "Bastard, why would I be scared?" Nian Liandan was enraged. Just as she was about to charge forward, however, she instantly stopped and sneered. "You want to provoke me into revealing an opening? I have roamed the outer realms for 70 years. How could I fall for it so easily?" As he spoke, he waved his hand, and a pitch-black heavy sword flew directly into his hand from the corner of the room. He held it horizontally in front of his chest, and his entire aura suddenly changed. There was a hint of disdain in his eyes as he looked down on this young man who was much younger than him. His gaze was so sharp that it seemed to be able to see through the opponent's internal organs. He was searching for the opponent's carelessness and flaws. Even if the opponent was distracted for a moment, he could take advantage of it and attack until the opponent bled to death. The murderous aura in the room suddenly became so thick that even breathing became difficult. Yilu Nanxian and Li Qinglu's expressions changed slightly, and they hurriedly retreated near the door. Only then did the pressure lessen greatly. As for Mu Wanqing, she was protected by Song Qingshu behind her, so she did not feel anything out of the ordinary. On the other side, Liu Yangzhua, who was lying on the bed, had his entire face flushed red. His martial arts had been crippled, and right now, he did not have any inner energy to protect his body. He almost couldn't breathe, and at the same time, he was overwhelmed with shock. I was ambushed by this guy. I originally felt that I lost unjustly, but when he attacked me, he didn't even take out this heavy sword. Could it be that I don't even have the right to make him take out his sword? Nian Liandan, who had been infinitely elevated in the depths of Li Liangzua's heart, knew his own pain. Song Qingshu was clearly standing not too far away, but he could not lock onto the opponent's aura at all. It was as if the opponent did not exist in this world. However, his eyes could clearly see that the opponent was just standing there casually, as if his entire body was full of flaws. Nian Liandan's heart trembled, No wonder Jinluan Fuwang and the others praised this guy to the heavens. He is indeed a bit troublesome. Song Qingshu looked at the black sword in his hand in surprise. Why does your sword look a bit like a heavy, dark steel sword? His first reaction was that Yang Guo had encountered this person, and as a result, his dark steel sword was stolen. However, upon closer inspection, he discovered that the sword in the opponent's hand was different from the dark steel sword in Yang Guo's hand. His sword was heavier and larger. You have good eyes. This is a dark steel heavy sword that weighs several hundred kilograms, forged by a strange person using the essence of dark steel. I have roamed the outer realm for dozens of years, and there has never been a match for this heavy sword, Nian Liandan said proudly. However, he felt that the aura he had painstakingly built up had been torn apart by the opponent's ordinary words. He hurriedly took a step forward, and the heavy sword in his hand changed from horizontal to pointing straight at the opponent. A powerful and bone-chilling sword aura once again surged towards the opponent. Several hundred kilograms. Song Qingshu couldn't help but be a bit surprised. It should be known that Yang Guo's dark steel sword was only 8 by 8 and 64 kilograms, and he was able to roam the central plains by relying on the heavy sword edgeless. The person in front of him had a dark steel heavy sword that was several times heavier than Yang was. Seeing how he wielded it as if it were light, it was no wonder that he was known as one of the 3 great craftsmen of the outer realm. It was no wonder that he was a bit disdainful towards Jinluan Fuwang and a master of the guardian deity. Jinluan Fuwang's golden wheel couldn't even block Yang Guo's heavy sword, much less this heavy sword that weighed several hundred kilograms. As for the master of the guardian deity's indestructible body, even though it was impervious to swords and spears, it still had its limits. In the end, it was still a body of flesh and blood. Even a body of steel wouldn't be able to withstand being smashed by this heavy dark steel sword that weighed several hundred kilograms and contained deep internal energy. Now you know how powerful I am. Nian Liandan's face was a bit proud as he continued. Previously, the Golden Snake Camp played an important role in the peace negotiations between the Mongols and the Southern Song. I also don't want to destroy the relations between the two sides. How about we stop here? The other's unfathomable strength made him feel a bit confused, but he was confident that he had already displayed enough strength to make the other retreat in the face of difficulties, so he took the initiative to throw out an olive branch. Song Qingshu lightly shook his head. I said before, today you must die. Nian Liandan's gaze fell on Mu Wanqing behind him, and she finally understood. So that's how it is. Ha ha ha, Lil Yangzhua, I thought she was your empress. So it turns out that she's already had an affair with you. Who knows how many green hats she's put on you, haha. Liu Liang's expression instantly became incomparably gloomy. He had also just noticed Mu Wanqing's expression of attachment towards Song Qingshu. She had never shown this kind of expression to him before, so he had long since been angry in his heart. However, Song Qingshu's appearance had brought him a ray of hope, so he could only forcefully suppress the anger in his heart. Now that he was once again evoked by Nian Liandan, he couldn't help but grit his teeth and think. These two aren't good people. It's best if they die together and die cleanly. He had originally hesitated on whether or not he should warn Song Qingshu about Nian Liandan's killing move, but now he no longer had that thought. He wanted them to die together in the Yellow Springs. Hearing Nian Liandan's arrogant laughter, Song Qingshu frowned. So much nonsense. Since you don't dare to make the first move, then I'll make the first move. The tip of his foot pushed off the ground, and his entire person attacked the other. Nian Liandan was shocked when he felt as if an incomparably sharp sword had suddenly appeared in front of him. Fortunately, he had purposely said those words to provoke Nian Liandan earlier, so he had long since made preparations. Focusing 120% of his concentration, the profound iron-heavy sword created thousands of sword shadows that formed a sword net that was like an iron wall that not even a drop of water could penetrate. Chapter 1867. Song Qingshu's martial arts had already reached a certain realm. Not long ago, he had been studying the Carefree Sect's martial arts diagrams in the secret room of Spirit Vulture Palace. After mastering them, he had the extraordinary feeling of being able to see through everything. Everything became 10 times clearer in his eyes. Not only could his opponent's almost imperceptible movements escape his eyes, even the contraction and expansion of his pores, the changes in the light in his eyes, and the circulation of the true chi in his body were all reflected in his mind that was as clear as a mirror. Using his finger as a sword, he turned into thousands of sword shadows. Each finger pointed straight at his opponent's gaps and weak points. Nian Liandan suddenly realized that as his opponent closed in and attacked with his fingertips, his impenetrable sword net suddenly became full of openings. He couldn't help but jump in fright and hastily change his move. The sword net returned to a single sword, which then turned into a long rainbow that attacked his opponent, using clumsiness to counter skill. He had thought it through very clearly. No matter how high his opponent's martial arts were, he was still made of flesh and blood. His recondite iron heavy sword weighed several hundred kilograms. There was no reason for him to lose when his opponent's fingers collided head-on. In the instant he changed his move, Song Qingshu's aura suddenly disappeared without a trace. He pulled back his fingers and then flicked one hand toward the side of his recondite iron heavy sword while his other hand continued to press toward Nian Liandan. Nian Liandan, who was in the game, was frightened out of his wits. He could never have imagined that his opponent would be able to casually change his move under this kind of pressure, causing him to instantly use up the power of his indomitable move. However, he could only blame himself. If his heavy sword hadn't gone from cleverly to clumsiness and his aura had weakened slightly, his opponent wouldn't have been able to find that fleeting opening and directly attack him. Thoughts aside, he had roamed the outer realm for decades and was known as one of the 3 great craftsmen. How could he be easy to deal with? He immediately cast aside all thoughts and became one with his sword. He spun his recondite iron heavy sword and used the blade instead of the body of the sword to meet his opponent's finger. Song Qingshu was also slightly impressed. He was able to lift such a heavy recondite iron heavy sword as if it were light. His nimbleness in changing moves was truly shocking. However, he had mastered the martial arts of Carefree Sect, especially the plumb, snapping hand of Heaven Mountain. There should be no one in the world who could compare nimbleness to him. He lifted his wrist gently. His movements seemed to be slow, but even though he moved later, he arrived first. In the next moment, he appeared right above recondite steel heavy sword. He extended his finger and tapped the blade. Nian Liandan's entire body shook violently. In that instant, he could no longer hold on to the heavy sword in his hand, and it directly fell to the ground. Fortunately, his 70 years of martial arts were not easy to deal with, and he forcefully used a strange movement technique to retreat. He felt his arm go numb, and the webbing between his thumb and forefinger had already been injured by the opponent's strength, bleeding. He could not help but shiver, and his heart trembled. Song Qingshu did not give chase. Instead, he stood where he was and commented, "Your movement technique is not bad. It can already be considered one of the best in the world." It wasn't that he didn't know that antagonists died because they talked too much. The reason why he did not give chase and attack was that he wanted to use this opportunity to gain a better understanding of the martial arts of these outsider grandmasters. This way, he would have a better understanding of the other experts under Temujin's command in the future. Seeing his famous weapon quietly fall at the opponent's feet, Nian Liandan's heart was in turmoil. After his martial arts reached a high level, he could rely on his recondite steel heavy sword to sweep away all obstacles in his path. Even if he ran into a few people whose martial arts were higher than his, he would not lose his weapon in a single move. This person was so young, but how had he trained to have such martial arts and vision? But now that his life was at stake, he had no time to think about other things. He could only use everything he had learned in his life to try and turn the situation around. Why is there a sudden fragrance in the room? Yalu Nanxian suddenly exclaimed, a little confused. Li Qinglu also sniffed, and indeed, there was a strange fragrance. It was not as natural as a fresh flower. nor was it as enticing as the fragrance of a young girl. On the contrary, it was filled with a very strange feeling. Noticing the white mist surrounding Nian Liandan, Li Qinglu was also an expert in poisons. She couldn't help but be alarmed. Big brother Song, be careful, the fragrance is poisonous. Just as she said this, she felt a little dizzy. Her whole body could no longer stand. She hurriedly leaned against a nearby pillar to stabilize herself. Nian Liandan laughed heartily. It's too late. This is our flower room sex treasure, the immortal floral aura. Since young, we have been soaking in all kinds of medicinal herbs to cultivate our internal energy. Once we've mastered it, as long as we circulate the immortal floral aura in our body, we will be able to emit a unique fragrance that can enchant the soul, making us invincible. From the beginning, although he was a little wary of Song Qing-shu, he never lost confidence because he had this trump card in his hand. Li Liangzhua, who was lying not far away, secretly clenched his teeth. He had fallen for this trick. At that time, he had been reading memorials when he suddenly smelled this fragrance. Then, he suddenly felt that his internal energy was somewhat lacking, and his whole body felt a little dizzy. At this time, Nian Liandan suddenly rushed out to attack him. As a result, even though he was the leader of both the Kongtong sect and the Carefree sect, and his martial arts had already reached the level of a present-age grandmaster, he still lost miserably at the hands of the other, even though he was clearly the leader of both the Kongtong sect and the Carefree sect, and his martial arts had already reached the level of a present-age grandmaster. In other words, you've been pickled? Song Qingshu looked at the other rather curiously. Nian Liandan, seeing that he was still standing firmly in the same place, Nian Liandan finally couldn't help but ask, "Are you all right?" Song Qingshu shrugged. "If you were a beauty that could cause the downfall of cities and countries, and your body emitted a faint fragrance, perhaps I would be intoxicated and faint. But you're a stinky man. I don't know if this is the smell of a fox or something else, so why would I faint?" His martial arts had reached such a high level that he was already immune to hundreds of poisons. In addition, he had previously been tormented by the world's #1 poison, the golden rippling flower, in Yangzhou. Now, he could be said to be immune to all poisons, so how could he be intoxicated by this strange fragrance? Impossible! How could the flower immortal qi that has been passed down in our flower room for hundreds of years be ineffective? This was truly somewhat beyond Nian Liandan's understanding. He suddenly came to a realization. You must be forcing yourself to calm down. Actually, you're already an arrow at the end of its flight. Ha ha ha. After he finished speaking, he let out a sinister laugh and attacked the other, not wanting to give the other any time to force out the poison. Of course, the other's martial arts were too unfathomable, so he didn't dare to be careless. As he attacked, he used the Flower Soul Celestial technique that could control a person's mind, and his eyes shone with a strange light. Even though the Flower Soul Celestial technique was developed to deal with women and could make women obedient, it wasn't as effective against men, but it could still affect a man's consciousness to a certain extent. As long as he made eye contact with the other party, he could invade the other party's mind. If the other party's mind was slightly muddled, his next attack could make the other party suffer a grievance on the spot. It wasn't that he hadn't considered the other party's soul-shifting technique, but now that the other party's internal energy was restrained by the flower immortal qi, the other party was just struggling to hold on. So how could he use the soul-shifting technique? The divine light in Song Qingshu's eyes was clear, and he wasn't affected at all. He casually waved his hand, and the dark steel heavy sword on the ground swiftly flew up and attacked Nian Liandan at lightning speed. Nian Liandan was dazzled by his gaze, and he was rather perplexed. By the time he reacted, it was already too late. The dark steel heavy sword had already attacked his chest with a supreme might, and he hurriedly put his hands together in front of his chest in an attempt to catch the huge sword. Unfortunately, the sword contained Song Qingshu's power, and its momentum was so rapid that there was no way he could catch it. Very quickly, the dark steel heavy sword broke through the defense of his hands and directly collided with his chest. The only thing worth rejoicing about was that this sword was flying in the opposite direction. Otherwise, wouldn't be the hilt, but the tip of the sword that pierced his chest. Even so, his muscles and bones were all broken by this collision, and his entire person collapsed to the ground. Do you know why I spared your life? Song Qingshu walked in front of him and looked down at him indifferently. Nian Liandan spat out a large mouthful of blood, and he didn't have the strength to answer. Song Qingshu didn't mind, and said, "You've been picking flowers all over these years, and I don't know how many women you've harmed. Killing you with a single strike is really letting you off easy. No matter how I thought about it, the best punishment was to let you experience how those women felt at that time." What do you mean? Nian Liandan finally choked out a sentence in a hoarse voice. Chapter 1868. Li Qinglu was startled. Although she didn't understand what he meant, she still answered, "Many merchants from the western regions pass by here. There are quite a few Kunlun slaves." Shishao was located on the Silk Road, so east-west exchanges were quite frequent. Song Qingshu continued, "I want black ones, not Southeast Asian ones." The slaves of ancient Southeast Asia and Africa were collectively known as Kunlun slaves. Song Qingshu was afraid that the other party would make a mistake, so he specifically asked for black uncles. Li Qinglu's expression became even more confused. Yes, that's good." Song Qingshu's smile was extremely strange. Nian Liandan saw his expression and felt a bit scared. "What do you want?" Song Qingshu smiled slightly. "Didn't I say just now? I want you to experience the feelings of those innocent women that you once violated." Nian Liandan was angry. "I'm a man. How can I experience that kind of feeling?" Song Qingshu shrugged. "Who said that men can't experience it?" He felt a chill when he thought of all the jokes in the future, such as Billy going up to men and picking up soap. Nian Liandan was startled at first, but he quickly reacted. After all, it was normal for people to be gay in history. He hurriedly said, "No, don't. The people of the flower room hate men the most. Just thinking about it makes me want to vomit, ugh." He had just finished speaking when he couldn't help but vomit. "Nonsense. If I didn't make you feel disgusted, would I give you someone you like?" Song Qingshu couldn't help but ridicule. Nian Liandan hurriedly corrected himself. No. I hate women the most in my life. Just thinking about women makes me want to vomit. I like men the most." Song Qingshu smiled. "That's perfect. Since you like men the most, I'll fulfill your wish." Nian Liandan, actually, it wasn't that he suddenly became stupid. It was completely because he had been high up for a long time and suddenly fell to the ground. That kind of contrast could make anyone go crazy. Moreover, the punishment described by the other party was too terrifying. Song Qingshu couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He directly said to Li Qinglu, "Go find some black uncles and have them serve our flower fairy well." "No." Nian Liandan was so angry that he vomited blood and fainted. Yelu Nanxian and Mu Wanqing both had strange expressions on their faces. Yelu Nanxian and Mu Wanqing's faces were red as they pouted coquettishly, thinking that Song Qingshu was too naughty. But no matter how they thought about it, it seemed like this was the only way to punish Nian Liandan. On the other side, Li Liangzuo's jaw dropped in shock. When he saw Nian Liandan unleash the divine aura of flowers, he thought that victory was within his grasp. Who knew that the tables would turn in an instant? However, when he thought of the fate that Nian Liandan was about to face, he couldn't help but feel happy. After all, he had been tormented by that pervert for the past few days. Now that there was an even more powerful pervert to counter him, it could be said that he had avenged himself. He had, and Lili had. By Luli Chunli, by he. By Nian Chanshu, she had taken out the grieving wind, softening antidote, and let the others smell it. Even though it wasn't right, the strong, pungent smell of the antidote still woke everyone up from the flower fairy energy. "I have my ways." Song Qingshu had a plan. "I'll hand Li Liangzua over to you. You can do whatever you want with him. It can be considered as avenging your father and fulfilling one of your wishes." Li Qinglu walked in front of Li Liangzua and took out a dagger from her sleeve. Thinking of her father's death, her eyes almost spat fire. Li Liangzua hurriedly shouted, "You can't kill me. My trusted subordinates are spread across the 64 provinces of the country and control more than half of Western Xia. I've made a secret agreement with them. Without my order, none of you can command them. When the time comes, war will break out and all of Western Xia will fall into chaos. Finally, it will completely disappear. At that time, you will become the sinner of Western Xia's ancestors. On the side, Song Qingshu finally understood why Nian Liandan had kept him alive all this time. It turned out that there was another reason. Li Qinglu frowned and finally put away the dagger. She returned to Song Qingshu's side and said, "Meng Lang, forget it. Keeping him alive is more useful for your big plan." Song Qingshu smiled faintly. "You don't have to worry. I have a way." After saying that, he walked to the bedside and looked down at Li Liangzhua. "Look into my eyes, soul transfer technique." No. Li Liangzhua thought of the secret technique from the 9E manual that Song Qingshu had just displayed and hurriedly closed his eyes. Unfortunately, it was already too late. His consciousness was quickly lost in the other's black, hole-like, chaotic eyes. After a while, Song Qingshu had thoroughly inquired about the secret agreement between him and each of his trusted subordinates. He had Mu Wanqing take a piece of paper and write it down. Then he said to Li Qinglu, "Now I'll hand him over to you. You can do whatever you want with him." Li Qinglu smiled sweetly. "Thank you, Meng Lang. But can you please go outside for a while? I don't want to show my bad side in front of you." Song Qingshu nodded. "No problem. I still have to deal with Helian Tieshu's matter." Arriving in front of Nian Liandan, he took out the special finger medicine paste and took his face. With a shake of his body, he became Nian Liandan. Swaggering out of the hall with Mu Wanqing and Yelu Nanxian, Li Liangzhua was lying on the bed like a pile of mud. He knew everything was over. After Song Qingshu brought Mu Wanqing and Yelu Nanxian out of the hall, they just happened to run into the palace guards who were rushing over. "Honorable Master Nian, what happened here?" The leader respectfully bowed to Song Qingshu. Song Qingshu waved his hand. "A few assassins overestimated themselves and wanted to enter the palace to assassinate you. They were killed by this seat. Honorable Master Nian's martial arts are unrivaled. This little one admires you." The leader of the Imperial Guards laughed and flattered. He didn't doubt Nian Liandan's words. After all, he had personally seen Nian Liandan fight and knew how terrifying his martial arts were. But when his gaze fell on Mu Wanqing and Yelu Nanxian, he couldn't remain calm. "These are the Empress and the Crown Princess?" Song Qingshu reached out and pulled the two women into his arms. "Ha ha ha, that's all in the past. Now, they're my concubines." The two women blushed, but they couldn't show anything in front of everyone. They could only obediently snuggle in his arms. However, the two women secretly pinched him. "Honorable Master Nian is indeed very charming." The leader of the Imperial Guards was Helian Tieshu's trusted aide. He knew about the flower room's nature, but he was still indignant. Who would have thought that the two most beautiful flowers of our Western Xia would be defiled by this old pervert? I wonder where the Silver Stream Princess is. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to escape his clutches. Unfortunately, he only dared to curse a few times in secret and didn't dare to show it. "Go and call your general over. Tell him that I have made some progress on my side. That person is willing to talk." Song Qingshu had disguised himself too many times over the years. Now that he was disguised as Nian Liandan, his every movement was exactly the same as Nian Liandan's, not revealing the slightest flaw. Chapter 1869. When Song Qingshu and the others returned to the bedchamber, they couldn't see Li Liangzhua anymore. They could only see a person lying on the ground, covered with a layer of cloth. Various kinds of blood faintly oozed out, indicating that he had suffered a lot of torture before his death. Li Qinglu's hands seemed to be stained with blood. When she saw Song Qingshu, she hurriedly put them on her back. She seemed to be at a loss. Song Qingshu stepped forward and looked at the corners of her gentle eyes. "Did you cry just now?" "Yes. I couldn't hold it back when I thought of how good my father used to be to me." Li Qinglu bit her lip, trying hard not to let her tears fall again. Song Qing-shu took her hand and gently wiped the blood on her hand with a handkerchief. What's there to hide to avenge your father? Li Qinglu's eyes turned red. I'm afraid that you won't like me after seeing how ruthless I am. Song Qing-shu said with a straight face. If I repay evil with good, how can I repay good with good? Of course, I have to repay evil with justice. In terms of justice, Liu Yangzhou plotted to usurp the throne and was the root cause of the turmoil in Xixia. In terms of justice, he was the enemy who killed your father. No matter what, you should have killed him. Why would I blame you for this? Meng Lang. Li Qinglu was very touched, but she still felt that something was wrong. But Sister Mu and Sister Yelu are kind and gentle, but I'm so vicious. Even if you don't say it, you'll definitely dislike me in your heart. Mu Wanqing, who was standing to the side, was furious when she saw that there was another woman by Song Qingshu's side after not seeing him for a while. But Song Qingshu had helped her in Jiatan Temple, so she had to accept his kindness. She couldn't flare up and could only keep a straight face. But when she heard Mu Wanqing's compliment, she finally couldn't help but laugh. You're afraid that you have some misunderstanding about me. I'm not gentle at all. As he spoke, he raised the poison sleeve dart on his arm and aimed it at Song Qingshu's lower abdomen, as if he was venting his anger. On the side, Yelu Nancian was also giggling, a gloating expression on her face. Right now, Song Qingshu was wearing Nian Liandan's disguise, which was indeed very annoying. Yelu Nancian couldn't wait for her to shoot that arrow. In any case, Song Qingshu's martial arts were very high. This arrow wouldn't be able to hurt him. Letting him suffer a little would be a good thing, lest he went around fooling around. Song Qingshu only felt a chill between his legs. He hurriedly said to Li Qinglu, "It's not like I didn't know who you are before. You are in charge of the Class 1 Hall of Western Xia, the intelligence agency of the entire country. In the future, I also need you to take charge of this area for me. If you are a naive person, I will cry." Hearing his sincere words, Li Qinglu finally believed that he was sincere and couldn't help but feel happy. On the side, Mu Wanqing blinked and couldn't help but ask, "What do you mean by naive?" Song Qingshu was startled. For a moment, he really didn't know how to explain it. This can only be understood. Yelu Nancian also joined in. Why does it sound like cursing? Sometimes, you can also understand it that way. Song Qingshu smiled bitterly. Fortunately, there was movement outside the hall. He hurriedly ordered the women to hide the unconscious Nian Liandan. After a while, Helian Taishu walked in. He didn't bring many people with him, only a few personal bodyguards. After all, the nominal emperor of Western Xia was imprisoned here. The fewer people who saw his miserable appearance, the better to avoid any accidents. What happened to Li Liangzhua? Helian Taishu quickly noticed the corpse on the ground and paled in fright. I've already asked for the password. There's no point in keeping him, Song Qingshu calmly replied. Helian Taishu was quite surprised. He was actually willing to tell us the password. Of course he wasn't willing, but I used the empress he likes to threaten him. So he had no choice but to say it, Song Qingshu replied. Helian Taishu also saw the women at the side and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, "Princess Yin Chuan, Crown Princess, why are they here?" Song Qingshu smiled and said, "They entered the palace to rescue people, but I captured them." Helian Taishu couldn't help but look at Li Qinglu and Yelu Nancian. "Is it all right to leave them here to listen to us?" Song Qingshu said, "They've been affected by my flower soul immortal technique, and now they become my slaves. They'll obey my every word." "Great, General. There's no need to worry. Come, little girls, give me a smile." Mu Wanqing and the other girls were secretly annoyed in their hearts. But now that the matter was more important, they could only comply and smile sweetly at him. Even though it was a pretense, the three girls were originally outstanding beauties. This smile really filled the room with fragrance, each with their own charm, each with their own style. Helian Taishu couldn't help but be dazzled for a moment. He couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, "Master Nian's flower soul celestial technique is truly a skill that all men in the world yearn for even in their dreams." I wonder if you could teach me a thing or two. Song Qing-shu was secretly disdainful. Could this be the deep-rooted bad habit of men? He had never heard that Hellion Tai-shu was lustful, but he couldn't resist this temptation. However, what meaning was there in destroying the hearts of women and turning them into walking corpses that only knew how to listen to orders? However, he had misunderstood Hellion Tai-shu. Even a man who was not interested in women would not be able to resist the intimidating beauty of three peerless beauties at such a close distance. Even if one looked at the world, not many men would be able to resist it. However, Hellion Tai-shu still remembered the matter at hand. But what if the information Li Liangzhua spits out is false? It would be too risky to kill him now. Don't worry, under my Flower Soul Celestial technique, he won't be able to fake it. Song Qing-shu had only just found out that the Flower Soul Celestial technique was unable to bewitch a man's mind. Hellion Tai-shu probably didn't know about it either. Since Master Nian says so, then there really shouldn't be any problems. Hellion Tai-shu was suddenly filled with emotion. He clasped his hands towards the northwest. This time, I've finally fulfilled the wish of my clan that has existed for several hundred years. Firstly, it was because of Genghis Khan's assistance. Secondly, it is all thanks to Master Nian's unparalleled divine arts. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for me to control the capital so easily. Song Qing-shu's heart moved. He took the opportunity to ask, several hundred years? The ancestor of the great general's clan is... He wasn't afraid that Nian Liandan had asked this question before. Even if he was exposed, it would be as easy as flipping his hand to subdue the other party, since they were so close. At this moment, he was rambling on, mainly to get information out of the other party. After all, under normal circumstances, it was much easier to get information out of the other party than through torture. Hellion Tai-shu let out a faint sigh. I won't hide it from Master Nian. The blood of the Xiongnu flows in my bones. The ancestor of this line is the great Xia Wuli Emperor Hellion Bobo. Hellion Bobo? Song Qing-shu was startled. He had a slight impression of this name. It seemed to be a political power that existed during the 5 barbarian rebellions of the Western Jin dynasty. Back then, the Xiongnu and the Han engaged in over 100 years of war. In the end, due to internal strife, they were finally defeated by the Han dynasty. At the end of the Eastern Han dynasty, Cao Cao divided the Xiongnu into 5 tribes, completely announcing the end of the Xiongnu Chanyu dynasty. Afterwards, the Western Jin dynasty was greatly weakened by the 8 Princes' Rebellion. The descendant of the Maodun Chanyu, Lu Yuan, took the opportunity to rise up and destroy the Western Jin dynasty. In a sense, he could be considered to have avenged the Xiongnu. However, he was quickly defeated by several other powerful nomadic tribes. The last nation of the Xiongnu people was founded by my ancestor, Hellion Bobo. He founded the Grand Xia Kingdom in Tong Wan City. Speaking of which, it has the same name as the current Western Xia. Chapter 1870. Of course, whether or not I can sit on the throne of the great Xia Emperor will depend on Master Nian putting in a few good words for me in front of the great Khan. Seeing Song Qing-shu's expression, Hellion Tai-shu realized that he had gotten carried away. He quickly changed the topic and put on a fawning expression. Song Qing-shu smiled. I'm afraid I can't do that. Why? Hellion Tai-shu's heart skipped a beat. He thought that the Mongols would burn the bridge after crossing it. Because Song Qing-shu deliberately lowered his voice, causing Hellion Tai-shu to move closer. In the blink of an eye, Song Qing-shu had sealed all the acupoints in his body. The bodyguards that Hellion Tai-shu had brought in were not mediocre either. They quickly drew their swords and rushed over. There were also people who hurriedly issued a warning. Unfortunately, Song Qing-shu and the others were unprepared. How could they let them succeed so easily? Song Qing-shu's figure was like a ghost. With a few leaps, he had subdued several bodyguards. As for the bodyguard who had intended to call the police, he had already been attacked by the 3 women who had been waiting for him. Although they had all been carefully selected by Hellion Tai-shu, The three women were also considered experts in Jianghu. Under the surprise attack, the bodyguard did not even have the chance to make a sound before he was subdued. Master Nian, why are you doing this? Is the Great Khan burning the bridge after crossing it? Helian Taishu could not help but feel terrified. He knew that if he called for help now, his life would be in danger. Thus, he only asked in an attempt to negotiate to preserve his own interests. Li Qinglu could not bear it any longer. She stepped forward and slapped him, her whole body trembling with anger. Helian Taishu, the late emperor and the old princess have treated you with great kindness. Yet, you actually have the ambition of a wolf and do such a disgraceful thing. Princess Yinchuan, Helian Taishu was dumbfounded. You didn't lose your mind? This princess has not even cleaned up the Xixiao Empire. How can I be so easily harmed by you villains? Li Qinglu recalled that the entire Xixiao country had been thriving a few days ago. So much so that Liao had been forced to send the daughters of the imperial clan to make peace with the Xixiao country. But now, 2 emperors, a crown prince, and several princes had died in a row in just a few days. The whole country was in a precarious situation. Li Qinglu didn't know whether the country could hold on or not. At this point, Helian Taishu finally understood. What he thought of Li Liang's mysterious death, he couldn't help but look at Song Qingshu. You're not Teacher Nian. Who are you? Song Qingshu smiled faintly. I don't have the habit of talking too much like those villains. Think about it yourself. Understanding the meaning behind his words, Helian Taishu finally panicked. You can't kill me. My subordinates are all outside. No, the entire royal palace, and even Lingzhou City are all my trusted subordinates. If you kill me, none of you will survive. Song Qingshu didn't care in the slightest. Since I can impersonate Nian Liandan so that you can't tell, I can also impersonate you so that your subordinates can't tell. I don't believe that you will set up some secret code system like Li Liangzwa did. Helian Taishu was at a loss for words. How could an ordinary person be as painstaking as Li Liangzwa? That secret code system was something he had meticulously researched during his 10 years as a carefree prince in order to hide from Li Yuanhao, the crown prince, and the imperial uncle. It wasn't something that could be easily imitated. Song Qingshu couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He directly knocked him out. Now was not the time to kill him. As for the other guards, he didn't kill them for the time being. After all, they were Helian Taishu's trusted subordinates. They definitely knew many of his secrets. For example, the arrangements of the royal palace and various places in Lingzhou City. He could interrogate them separately and combine their confessions to obtain complete information. Right now, everyone in the royal palace is his subordinates. Where can we hide them from the public? Looking at the unconscious Nian Liandan, Helian Taishu, and his subordinates, Song Qingshu was in a difficult position. Right, why don't we lock them in the ice cellar? It's dark there, and no one usually goes there. It's a good place to hide people. No, Li Qinglu hurriedly shouted. When she noticed the surprised gazes of the other girls, she couldn't help but blush. She hastily said, I was in charge of Class 1 Hall in the past. There are quite a few secret rooms like this in the royal palace. Locking them, there will be absolutely safe. She had spent the most wonderful time of her life with her lover in the ice cellar. To her, the ice cellar was a sacred place for the two of them to pledge their love. How could she let these stinky men tarnish that place? Song Qingshu also came to his senses. He inwardly cursed himself for being too careless. He quickly went along with her and said, Among the few of us, no one can compare to you in terms of familiarity with the royal palace. Then, I'll let you make the arrangements. Also, you can summon the former members of Class 1 Hall that you contacted into the palace. We need to have some of our own people in our hands. But the guards of the royal palace are all Helian Taishu's men. I'm afraid it won't be that easy to summon them. Li Qinglu said awkwardly. Don't worry. I'll use Helian Taishu's name to pass down the order. Can't we just say that they've pledged their allegiance to me? Song Qingshu squatted down beside Helian Taishu and took out the medicinal paste he had prepared a long time ago. Soon, he made a mold of Helian Taishu's face. He also made masks of the faces of the guards beside him. Your identities and appearances are too eye-catching, so it'll be inconvenient for you to act. From now on, pretend to be them and follow by my side. This will prevent Helion Tieshu's subordinates from becoming suspicious if all my personal guards disappear after I leave, Song Qingshu instructed. Huh, you have to wear the clothes of these stinky men? How annoying. Although Mu Wanqing sounded disgusted, she didn't refuse. After all, she understood that proper business was more important. About an hour later, the intimidating beauties were nowhere to be seen. In their place were several stern-looking guards. Looking at their appearances, the women couldn't help but laugh. Yalu Nancian smiled and said, "Let's take a break first. Otherwise, it'll be troublesome if we can't hold back our laughter when we go out." Mu Wanqing nodded in agreement. Suddenly, she remembered something. "Big brother Song, we can't change our voices like you. What if we give ourselves away when we open our mouths?" Hearing the women's voices, some were clear and melodious while others were charming and soft, Song Qingshu felt a headache coming on. "Later, try not to open your mouths. I'll handle everything. As for how to change our voices, I'll teach you when I'm free. Right now, time is of the essence. Even if there's a flaw, there's nothing I can do." Pretending to be Helion Tieshu's men is no small matter. We're in the tiger's den now. If any news leaks out, we'll all be consigned to eternal damnation. That's why I don't think we should tell anyone about this secret, not even our own family. Li Qinglu suddenly said. Yalu Nancian nodded in agreement. Right now, we really need to be careful. She didn't have any family in the spirit state, so she naturally wouldn't reveal this secret. Mu Wanqing hesitated. "I don't have any other family. I only have my mother and I. She seems to have also been captured and brought into the palace." Li Qinglu rolled her eyes and directly said, "I'm the most familiar with the palace. In a moment, I'll go save Andy. Otherwise, you'll expose yourself because of your deep relationship with your daughter. That wouldn't be good." Mu Wanqing felt that what she said made sense. She didn't think too much about it and nodded. "Then I'll have to trouble Princess." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.